The story starts with a boy named Yukina, nervously asking a bishop named Pain what he wanted to talk about. He assumed Yukina already knew, but he had no idea. The two sat in silence for a moment before Pain finally said it was about the brave. Yukina looked confused and the village chief called him a fool, loudly saying it was about Relix. At that moment, Yukina realized they were talking about Relix becoming the new brave. He remembered seeing Pain speaking with Relix the day before. Curious, Yukina asked what was going on with the great brave. Pain explained that Relix would soon leave on a journey to gain the power needed to defeat the Demon Lord. However, Pain believed Relix might not have the strength to complete it alone. They planned to take him to the royal capital for training, but worried he would feel uneasy. To help, they decided to bring along someone from the village. Yukina immediately understood and tried to find a way out, but Pain quickly made it clear. Relix wanted Yukina to go with him. Shocked, Yukina asked why. He was just a simple farmer who needed to work to eat and pay taxes. Pain then made an offer. They would exempt him from taxes, cover his living expenses, pay him a salary as the Great Brave's caretaker, and the church would handle all travel costs to the royal capital. After hearing these conditions, Yukina agreed to be Relix's babysitter. Earlier, Pain had declared that Relix was the brave chosen by God, and the proof was his stigmata. Relix's parents looked proud and encouraged him not to stay trapped in their small village. However, Relix worried that he hadn't yet repaid his parents for everything they had done for him. Despite his concerns, the village chief and others urged him to go with pride. Meanwhile, unlike Relix, the chief wondered where that troublemaker Yukina had disappeared during such an important gathering. Even though Yukina was the same age as Relix, they were not close. However, Relix always felt that Yukina was different from others, and somehow caught his attention. In this world, a calamity called the Demon Lord appeared every 100 years, bringing chaos and destruction. The only one who could stop him was the Great Brave. Relix had been chosen as the new brave, something he had only read about in fairy tales. He felt proud, just like the rest of the villagers. But Yukina still treated him the same as before. While riding in the carriage, Yukina noticed Relix staring and asked what was wrong. Relix simply said it was nothing. Yukina then complained about how far the royal capital was. He also mentioned that the churchmen had enough warriors and questioned why he had to come along. Relix remembered how Yukina was always getting into fights, but Yukina didn't want to hear that from someone strong. Relix found that thought puzzling. Just then, Pain told them they were nearing the royal capital. The two country boys looked around in awe at the new surroundings. Relix had expected it to be grand, but seeing it in person was completely different. It was on a whole other level compared to their small village. Pain then announced that he would now request a meeting between Relix and the king. Suddenly, the carriage door opened and Yukina stepped out casually. He said it was his stop and told them to call him if they needed him. Pain reacted too late and tried to stop him, but Yukina had already disappeared into the crowd. From the beginning, Yukina never planned to go to the royal capital for money. Instead, he had another place he had promised himself to visit in his lifetime, the red light district. Like many men, he dreamed of having an unforgettable first time. And since he had plenty of money, this seemed like the perfect chance. While he was there, he also wanted to find the most attractive woman in the capital. That was his plan. But as he wandered through the dark alleys, he realized they felt unsettling. Just then, he heard a girl's voice begging some men to stop. Without hesitation, Yukina jumped in and quickly took them down. He then turned to the girl and asked if she was okay. She stared at him in shock before thanking him, surprised at how easily he had defeated the men. Yukina was just happy she was safe, but he couldn't help but notice something. Her chest was quite a sight. The girl looked confused and asked if something was wrong. Yukina admitted that he couldn't stop staring at such a beautiful girl, and her face turned red immediately. He then suggested they leave the dark alley, as it wasn't a safe place for someone beautiful like her. Still flustered, the girl claimed she was not used to receiving such compliments. They heard voices nearby, and the girl looked worried. Yukina sighed and held out his hand to her. She hesitated, but he told her to trust him, at least for now. Then he took her hand and she let him lead her without resisting. It didn't take long for them to reach a busy street. The girl, looking exhausted, apologized, saying she wasn't used to going outside. Yukina told her to take deep breaths and calm down. After she rested, Yukina asked about her situation. She seemed unsure, so he assured her that she didn't have to say anything if she didn't want to. The girl hesitated before asking if he truly didn't mind. Yukina confirmed, explaining that he was the one who pulled her away in the first place, and now he wondered if he had done the right thing. The girl took a moment to gather her thoughts before explaining that she had simply gotten lost and ended up in the dark alleys. Yukina asked if she was serious, and she admitted it, feeling embarrassed. He then asked if she had anywhere she needed to go. Since she didn't mention a destination, he guessed she had been wandering aimlessly. She confirmed that exploring was her only reason for going out. Yukina couldn't believe what he had just heard and decided to invite her to join him. He told her he was new to the royal capital and was planning to walk around and do some sightseeing. The girl quickly agreed and asked if she could come along. Her cute reaction made Yukina feel flustered. As they walked, Yukina explained that he had come with someone. The girl thought he meant a friend, but Yukina couldn't agree with that. He almost let slip that Relix was the Brave. Telling her about the Brave would mean revealing that the Demon Lord had been resurrected, so he decided to keep that information to himself. Instead, he said he wasn't sure why he was dragged along in the first place. While they were exploring, Yukina noticed how lively the royal capital was, and wondered if it was always this busy. The girl told him things had only started picking up a few months ago, like there was something special happening. Yukina thought there might be a festival or something. She then told him that last week the Pope had announced that the God's chosen one, the Brave, was coming to the royal capital. Yukina was shocked by what he heard. He asked if the church really said that, and the girl confirmed the rumors about the Demon Lord's resurrection spreading. To calm the citizens, the church had announced the arrival of the Brave. Yukina's plan to keep things a secret to avoid panic had failed. To lighten the mood, he invited the girl to grab some food and she quickly agreed. Later, the girl looked at some meat skewers and Yukina ordered them for her. The shop owner called the girl beautiful and asked Yukina if they were on a date. The girl then wondered if what they were doing was a date, since she had heard about it in rumors. Yukina handed her the skewers with extra meat from the kind shop owner. The girl shyly admitted she didn't know how to eat it. Yukina started eating and the girl asked if they were eating without forks. Yukina just nodded. She thought this must be how regular people ate and took a bite. Her face lit up and she said it was the most delicious food she had ever eaten, asking if regular people always had such tasty meals. Yukina realized the girl wasn't like normal people at all. Flustered, she insisted she was just the most common of all common people, the king of commoners. Yukina decided not to argue and suggested checking out other stalls. They walked around enjoying the sights and more food. Yukina asked if the girl was having fun and she said it was the most fun she'd ever had. Yukina agreed, feeling the same. As it got darker, the girl commented how quickly time passed when having fun. She thanked Yukina for not prying into her life and assumed he had figured out she wasn't a commoner. Yukina said it was obvious because of her clumsiness. Suddenly, Yukina gave her a necklace, embarrassed, and said it was just a souvenir to remember their time together. He worried it might be too cheap. The girl said she would accept it but worried she couldn't give anything in return. She then noticed her ring and gave it to Yukina. Seeing the ring, Yukina worried it was too valuable for someone like him, but the girl reminded him it was rude to ask about the price of a farewell gift. Yukina just smiled. They then said their goodbyes. Meanwhile, Relix had a meeting with the king. The king asked if Relix was ready to face the Demon Lord. Relix said he should be if that was his destiny. That night, Relix walked away feeling stressed. He thought Yukina wouldn't be nervous if he were the one meeting the king. Just then, Yukina appeared and asked how things went. He mentioned that the church had prepared rooms for them, but he'd rather find a cheap hotel in town. Relix agreed, saying it would be best since he would be away for a few days to get the holy sword. Only the Brave and royal family could enter the temple. Yukina said not to worry and would just pass the time. He then asked who would go with Relix, and Relix confirmed it would be the king's daughter. The next morning, Yukina planned to do his real task in the royal capital, but he was surprised to see so many weapon stores. Suddenly, some men flew out of a store and a blacksmith began yelling that he wouldn't sell weapons to those good-for-nothing people, threatening to smash their skulls. Curious about the blacksmith, Yukina peeked inside. But before he could get too close, a hammer flew toward him, and Yukina dodged it just in time. The door was now damaged, and the old man noticed Yukina wasn't one of the men he had just kicked out. The old man apologized and checked if Yukina was hurt. He complimented Yukina's quick reflexes after seeing how well he dodged the hammer. Yukina thanked him and asked why he had made such a scene earlier. The old man explained that some people who had never hunted a monster were insisting on buying weapons they didn't deserve. Yukina didn't hold back, calling the old man's customer service terrible. The old man then asked what Yukina needed. Yukina said he was looking for a good sword for his friend. The old man was surprised Yukina wasn't buying for himself and told him to wait. As Yukina looked around, he noticed swords were popular since they were the signature weapon of the Brave. However, Yukina preferred using a spear, but they were expensive. Then he spotted an old-fashioned looking spear. The old man returned with a sword that hunters would use, and Yukina decided to buy it. The old man asked if Yukina wasn't buying a weapon for himself. Yukina said he was out of budget, and the old man understood it was because of the price. He then offered Yukina the spear he had noticed earlier, claiming it was a proper weapon despite being secondhand. Yukina agreed, feeling good vibes from it, and decided to get the spear. Suddenly, Yukina heard someone complain about being woken up from a nice dream. He asked the old man if he had said something, but the old man denied it. Yukina looked around and the voice told him to check what he was holding. The voice introduced itself as Graham, the spear Yukina was holding, and proudly claimed it was one of the few weapons in the world that could speak. Graham greeted Yukina as his new partner, and Yukina accepted its existence. Later at the inn, Graham complained about how cheap the place was. In the end, Yukina brought him back because he felt that if he got rid of the spear, he might get cursed. Graham was impressed by how calm Yukina was, since his previous masters usually acted shocked in situations like this. Yukina said he was also surprised, even though he seemed calm. He then mentioned that Graham used to talk differently back at the store. Graham explained that he used telepathy for private messages and showed Yukina how it worked. He thought it was easier and more comfortable to talk loudly this way. Yukina asked if Graham could use telepathy when they were in a crowd, and Graham agreed. He didn't want his master to look crazy by talking to himself in the middle of the city. Yukina didn't mind having Graham and was happy to have someone to talk to in the royal capital. They promised to get along for now. Soon after, Yukina went somewhere and Graham commented on how eager he was. Yukina said it was his main reason for coming to the royal capital. Graham found Yukina's reason funny and asked if someone else had already caught his master's attention. Yukina said no, but he did hold on to the ring a girl had given him earlier. He thought going to a brothel might help him forget about her. Since Yukina was new to this, he decided to go to a proper brothel first, and Graham agreed. He didn't want to see his master catch a disease and die like his previous one did. Yukina walked into a brothel and told the receptionist that he wanted to prove himself. Graham laughed at Yukina, finding his words embarrassing. At that moment, a girl asked the receptionist to clean the room she had just used before leaving. Yukina was surprised and asked if the girl worked there. The receptionist said the girl worked on a freelance basis. Hearing this, Yukina rushed out of the brothel and caught up with the girl. He called her over and asked if she would agree to be his first partner. The girl was surprised and asked if he was paying for her services. Yukina said he wanted to lose his V-card to someone as beautiful as her. The girl thanked him for the compliment but reminded him that her services weren't free, explaining she was expensive. Yukina asked about the price with concern, and the girl whispered it into his ear. When he heard the amount, he was so shocked that his real accent slipped out. Even so, he refused to give up and promised himself that he would find a way to get that much money no matter what. He then told the girl to remember his words because he was determined to buy her services. The girl introduced herself as Kyunai and said she looked forward to the day he would return. Without hesitation, Yukina signed up for the mercenary guild. Graham respected his eagerness, and Yukina said it was best to take action while the opportunity was there. Graham then asked how Yukina planned to make money quickly since he still needed to rank up to earn better rewards. In response, Yukina picked up a low-level extermination quest and said he would keep hunting weaker enemies to build up his earnings. Graham realized that Yukina wanted to sell the monster carcasses for extra money on top of the quest reward and called him stingy. Yukina said it was just being efficient. He easily defeated the rat monsters without breaking a sweat, and Graham praised him. Yukina explained that he was used to dealing with rodents from his time as a farmer. The two continued taking down more rat monsters. After the third one, Graham sighed and complained about hunting rats so soon after getting a new master. He had expected Yukina to go after bigger monsters for quick, high-paying rewards, but Yukina made it clear that he wasn't aiming to be a mercenary. The money from the rats was enough for him. Graham accepted that but pointed out that Yukina's spear skills were terrible. Yukina reminded him that he was just a farmer. Still, Graham saw potential in him and offered to help unlock his hidden talent. Yukina was skeptical about learning spearmanship from a spear itself, but Graham explained that he had seen many skilled warriors in the past, memorized their techniques, and planned to teach Yukina moves that suited him. Yukina doubted Graham had learned just by watching, but Graham told him to just follow along. Graham then gave Yukina a lesson on holding a spear properly, keeping a safe distance, and getting used to swinging it. Yukina had expected to learn flashy moves, but Graham told him to master the basics at his own pace first. The next day, Yukina easily defeated multiple rat monsters at once. He was surprised that he felt less tired than before. Graham explained that it was because he was moving more efficiently now. He also pointed out that Yukina had the strength for it all along. By the end of the day, Yukina had gathered 27 rat monsters and commented on how overrun the area was. Even so, he decided to call it a day and head home. Meanwhile, Relix went to the temple to get the holy sword. With him was Princess Aina, the same girl who had gone on a date with Yukina the day before. Relix felt uneasy about her coming along, but Aina insisted it was her duty as a princess. She told him to focus on himself since she had already trained to take care of her own safety. At first, Relix thought she was just a princess with beauty and nothing more, but he started to see that she had real strength and a noble heart. She blushed, knowing she would be his companion for a long time. After a while, they finally reached the holy sword. Relix stepped forward without hesitation and pulled it out. The sword slid out easily and glowed brightly. Then it introduced itself as Leva and welcomed Relix as the brave of this generation. At the same time, another talking weapon made a comment about how things had been strange lately. Yukina asked what he meant. Graham, the weapon, said there had been too many rat monsters around. Yukina agreed but saw it as a good thing since their numbers helped him reach his goal faster. Suddenly, Graham warned him to watch his back as kobolds appeared, trying to ambush him. However, Yukina quickly defeated them. Graham then pointed out how thin the monsters looked, as if they were starving. Yukina guessed they had smelled the meat he was carrying and wondered why they were struggling to find food. Graham reminded him that he was the one hunting them down. Only then did Yukina realize it. He mentioned that he had already hunted nearly 200 of them. Graham muttered that it was only natural. Yukina asked if he had said something, but Graham brushed it off and told him to focus on reporting the sudden increase in monsters to the guild instead. Later, at the mercenary guild, Yukina showed the spoils of his hunt. The receptionist praised him and called him the Rat Hunter. Yukina didn't like the title, but the receptionist explained that both the guild staff and farmers saw him as their savior. Yukina didn't care as long as he was getting paid, but he mentioned something that caught his attention. The receptionist listened and quickly realized it was about kobolds. Promising to report it to the higher-ups, she took the matter seriously. Just as Yukina was about to leave, Graham warned him about something. Suddenly, he was so surprised by what he saw that he accidentally spoke his thoughts out loud. A fox girl, the owner of the surprising site, glared at him and demanded to know what he had just said. Realizing his mistake, Yukina quickly apologized, saying he didn't mean to offend her. The fox girl noticed his spear and guessed he was the well-known rat killer. This annoyed Yukina, but before he could react, Graham stepped in, reminding him that she was not someone to mess with. Feeling nervous, Yukina tried to excuse himself. The fox girl, who at first thought he was brave, now saw him as a coward, just as she had expected. Yukina, confused and offended, wondered what her problem was. Graham pointed out that the fox girl was carrying a katana, a special kind of sword that looked thin but had incredible strength. Yukina was amazed by how much Graham knew about different weapons. Realizing where Yukina was heading, Graham assumed they were on their way for another visit to his promised girl. He also mentioned that Kunai being a doctor during the day was a great bonus. Yukina agreed but regretted that he couldn't shake hands with Graham to show it. Graham then recalled that most people preferred to save money before visiting a girl, but Yukina was different. He wanted to earn extra points in advance. Yukina saw a man trying to grab Kunai who looked worried. Realizing the man had bad intentions, he used the safer end of Graham to knock him out. After that, he greeted Kunai as if nothing had happened. Kunai soon served tea and thanked him for getting rid of the pushy customer. When she noticed he was bleeding, she wondered if it was her fault, but Yukina assured her it was from the forest. She then used her healing magic to close his wounds. Yukina wanted to repay her, but Kunai told him it was her way of thanking him for always bringing her gifts. Yukina then remembered that not many mages could use healing magic. He also wondered why Kunai still worked at night even though she was such a skilled healer. Kunai noticed his curious look and pointed out that he wasn't asking questions. Yukina replied that he didn't, but he would listen if she wanted to share something. Kunai said they weren't close enough yet to talk about her personal matters. After thinking for a moment, she suggested going on a date, saying it would be her way of thanking him for saving her recently. Outside, Yukina commented on the number of stalls lining the streets. Kunai explained that it was because of the recent Braves parade. Yukina hadn't realized Relix had to take part in it since he had been spending too much time in the forest. He also realized it was his first time exploring the city since Aina. Suddenly, Kunai grabbed his arm and with a sharp look asked if he was thinking about another girl. Startled, Yukina quickly denied it, but for some reason he also remembered the rude fox girl from before. Kunai noticed that he was thinking about a second girl as well. Flustered, Yukina had no choice but to mention the lady with fox ears. Kunai realized that Yukina was talking about the Silver Flash. Yukina was surprised to hear such a cool name, but Kunai explained that it was just her title. Then Yukina understood. It was just like his rat killer title. At the same time, Kunai finally figured out that Yukina was the rat killer all along. Kunai then asked about the other girl, but Yukina didn't give her an answer. She decided to let it go for now. Instead, she grabbed Yukina's arm tightly, pressing herself against him. She called it his penalty for thinking about other girls while they were on duty, and promised to stay close to him the whole time. After a while, Graham tried to tell Yukina something, but Yukina quickly reminded him that he wasn't supposed to talk during his date. Ignoring that, Graham warned him that the guy Yukina had beaten up earlier was now following them. The man looked furious, like he couldn't stand seeing the girl he wanted next to someone else. Kunai noticed something was off and asked what was wrong. Not long after, Yukina tricked the man into following him somewhere quiet, knocked him out, and tied him up. Kunai apologized, saying their date had been ruined because of her. She blamed her disgusting job for attracting creepy people. Deep down, she still couldn't bring herself to tell Yukina about her situation, but Yukina reassured her. He said that her work was still something to be proud of because she had a goal in mind. That was just his opinion, but it mattered to Kunai. Touched by his words, she stuck even closer to him. The next day, Yukina happily remembered how cute Kyunai had acted the day before. Kyunai had joked that if Yukina were just an ordinary innocent girl, she might have fallen for her. Yukina didn't quite understand what she meant by that, but she did notice how soft Kyunai was, especially in the chest area. Graham, sensing Yukina's thoughts, called him gross. Meanwhile, Relix saw Yukina walking around the streets. He realized that Yukina hadn't even bothered to watch the parade, proving that he really didn't care about him being the brave. Then he noticed Yukina's spear. Leva recognized it, but when Relix asked, she brushed it off as nothing. Before they could talk more, a servant approached Relix and informed him that the carriage was ready. Back in the forest, Graham instructed Yukina to focus, but Yukina assured him that he was steadily reaching his money-making goal. Despite Yukina's rough appearance, Graham admitted that he respected that part of him. As they continued walking, Yukina suddenly realized something strange. There were no monsters around, unlike the day before. Graham went silent, and when Yukina asked what was wrong, Graham said the forest was too quiet. Yukina agreed, comparing it to the calm before a storm. Graham then told him that, since he was at the center of it, he should do something about it. Yukina quickly told him not to jinx it. Just then, a growl came from nearby and a monster lunged at Yukina. However, he easily took it down with a single attack. He briefly considered selling the creature but was interrupted when Graham warned him not to get desperate. Another monster was coming. Before Yukina could react, the second monster was instantly slain by a familiar fox girl. Yukina, at a loss for words, awkwardly thanked her in a formal tone. The fox girl smirked and asked if Yukina was trying to go from rat killer to dog killer. Yukina didn't care much for the insulting title, but she pointed out that it didn't change the fact that he only hunted weak monsters. Graham warned Yukina to stay calm since she was someone he couldn't defeat. Yukina replied that he was simply doing whatever tasks the guild assigned him. He then introduced himself properly, but the fox girl scoffed, saying she had no interest in knowing the name of a weakling. Yukina wondered why she was acting so prickly, but he was patient enough to tolerate her attitude. Still, he couldn't help but question why the Silver Flash was even in the area. The fox girl explained that she was investigating something, though she complained that such a job should have been given to lower-ranked mercenaries, not someone like her. At that moment, Graham seemed to realize something, making Yukina curious about what it was. The fox girl then questioned why Yukina was using such a weak weapon like a spear. This time, Graham took offense. She went on to mention how everyone called Yukina a spineless spearman, who only fought rats. Though annoyed, Yukina admitted that he preferred fighting from a safe distance rather than up close like swordsmen. The fox girl then asked if the rumors didn't frustrate him. Yukina simply replied that he couldn't be bothered by things like that. For some reason, the fox girl got angry and called herself a fool for asking. She excused herself, saying she couldn't waste any more time with him. Yukina wondered what was wrong with the sassy fox girl. Graham then explained that she was a martial artist, not a mercenary. Unlike mercenaries who fought for a living, martial artists trained to improve their skills. These fighters hated having their combat styles or weapons insulted. Yukina then realized he was the complete opposite of her. Graham agreed, saying Yukina never cared about insults. Yukina understood, but he also noticed that the fox girl wasn't a bad person. Graham questioned how he could think that after their rough conversation. Yukina pointed out that she had saved him earlier, but Graham dismissed it, saying he was imagining things. Yukina decided to return to their usual rat hunt, but Graham suggested calling it a day. He hoped his worries were just paranoia and told Yukina they should go home if they didn't find any monsters in the next few minutes. 30 minutes later, Yukina was complaining about the sudden increase of kobolds in the area. He was surrounded and relied on Graham's instructions to dodge incoming attacks. He regretted not going home sooner. Graham told him it was too late for regrets and warned him not to end up as monster food. Suddenly, the kobolds started eating the corpses of their own kind. The sight made Yukina panic. After a while, Yukina took a break, but Graham warned him that another wave of kobolds was coming. Yukina asked what was really going on. Graham mentioned that a monster stampede was about to happen. He explained that this happened when monsters went wild at certain times. Yukina wondered if it was just them being aggressive like thugs, but Graham explained that it was mostly all about food. He said that when too many monsters gathered in one place, they started fighting for food. Recently, the area had been full of their usual prey, rat monsters. But now that they were almost gone, the kobolds had gone mad searching for food. Graham told Yukina that to them, he was just a walking meal. The only reason they left for now was because they had eaten enough of their fallen comrades. That explanation made Yukina want to run away. However, he couldn't shake the thought that he might be the reason for the stampede. Graham agreed that the stampede would have happened eventually, but admitted that Yukina's actions could have played a role. However, he also had another guess about what was truly causing it. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the forest and Yukina broke into a cold sweat. Graham was sure Yukina had figured out the truth by now. For the moment, he suggested running away since Yukina stood no chance against that creature with his current strength. However, Yukina was certain that the roar came from the direction where the fox girl had gone. That made both Yukina and Graham realize that the Silver Flash's mission was to investigate the signs of the stampede. Ignoring Graham's warning, Yukina ran straight toward the source of the roar. Graham tried to stop him, urging him to turn back, but Yukina didn't listen. When Yukina arrived at an open area, he saw kobold corpses scattered everywhere. Standing in front of the fox girl was a massive kobold. Graham knew right away that this had to be a kobold king, far stronger than the usual ones. He was certain this mutant was the cause of the stampede. Luckily, the kobold king hadn't noticed them yet because the strong smell of blood in the air dulled its senses. Graham warned Yukina not to do anything reckless or he'd be dead the moment the monster saw him. Yukina watched as the fox girl glared at the kobold king, gripping the hilt of her sword. In a flash, she drew her blade, slashed, and immediately sheathed it again. At that moment, Yukina and Graham understood why she was called the Silver Flash. Graham observed how she used the motion of drawing her sword along with a quick wrist rotation, allowing her to slash much faster than normal. All Yukina could see were afterimages of her attack. Graham expected such skill from a rank 2 mercenary, but he still believed she wouldn't last long. Yukina didn't understand why. After all, the fox girl seemed to be winning. Then she managed to wound one of the kobold king's eyes. Seeing an opportunity, she moved in to attack again, but the kobold king let out an ear-splitting scream. The fox girl suddenly stopped in her tracks. Graham yelled, demanding to know why she had frozen. At that moment, the regular kobolds charged in to attack. Graham realized the mutant had just given its minions an order. Yukina was confused. Those same kobolds had been terrified of the fox girl earlier. But Graham explained that the kobold king used its power to override their fear, forcing them to fight. Yukina found it hard to believe that these creatures would send their own young on what was clearly a suicide mission. Graham simply stated that monsters had no concept of parental love. That's when Graham noticed something else. The fox girl's sword was getting dull. She tried to hold her ground, but the swarm of enemies overwhelmed her and she got injured. Seeing her in danger, Yukina sprang into action. Ignoring Graham's warnings, he cut down the monsters blocking his path. Then Yukina saw something that made his heart sink. The fox girl's eyes looked empty, as if she had already given up. Without thinking, Yukina shouted out loud, taunting the kobold king. He swung his spear hard at the kobold king, but the monster's thick fur blocked the attack. Graham told him to focus, and the monster started attacking. As the fight continued, Graham told him to jump and roll to dodge. Yukina thanked him. Seeing Yukina charge into battle, Graham assumed he had a plan, but there was no plan at all. The kobold king roared, and Graham warned Yukina there was no turning back. If he showed any weakness, it would be over. He told Yukina to stay sharp and stand his ground. Yukina attacked again, but unlike the fox girl's strikes, his attacks did nothing. Frustrated, Yukina called Graham an edgeless spear, which made Graham angry. Yukina soon realized this fight was too much for a rookie like him. Graham then pointed out that the fox girl was in danger. Yukina, overwhelmed, said his hands were full. Graham instructed him to throw his knife at the monster's wounded left eye. Yukina aimed carefully and threw the knife. The kobold king flinched, distracted as it tried to block the attack. Taking the chance, Yukina rushed to the fox girl, defeated the nearby kobolds, and asked if she was okay. Hoping the monsters would give up soon, Yukina was disheartened when Graham explained that the creatures had already lost their reasoning because of the mutant's dominance. Suddenly, Graham warned him about a looming shadow behind him. Yukina later regained consciousness, confused about whether he was still alive. He soon realized he couldn't move his left arm, it was badly injured. The fox girl asked why he even came to help her. Yukina simply stated the obvious. He came to save her. She called him a fool, saying she never asked for help and that he got hurt because of it. Seeing the kobold king approaching, Yukina said there was no time to argue since they still needed to survive. The fox girl questioned why he risked himself for her when he wanted to live. She pointed out that he could have escaped alone, and no one would have blamed him since her death was already expected. But in his mind, Yukina knew he would have blamed himself if he had turned away. He always tried to play it safe. That's why he chose a spear, despite the mockery. Yet despite that, he still wanted to save the girl in the alley, sleep beside Kunai, and now protect the fox girl. The fox girl reminded Yukina of how she had always criticized him. She accused him of saving her only because he wanted to. In his mind, he didn't care what others said about him. He made his own decisions. He declared that he would help any woman in danger without hesitation. He had already made up his mind and planned to stick with it. The fox girl couldn't believe his reasoning. Yukina told her to be quiet and stay still since she was injured. Suddenly, Graham started laughing in a strange way and called Yukina amusing. He said he had been waiting for someone like him, someone selfish and bold. At that moment, Graham finally accepted Yukina as his true master. Yukina's pain suddenly disappeared. A shadow loomed over him. It was Graham. Graham then asked Yukina to say his name. Stretching out his healed arm, Yukina called out to Graham. Clenching his teeth, he launched an attack at the Kobold King. Graham declared that their pact was sealed and that Yukina would now be a hero who fought for his own desires, justice, and power. Graham then formally introduced himself as Graham, the Cursed Spear, the weapon of the hero. A mark appeared on Yukina's hand. However, Yukina's arm suddenly ached under Graham's weight. Graham told him he had overdone his swing. Yukina blamed Graham, but Graham made it clear that it was Yukina's own lack of strength. Graham explained that his ability was mass manipulation, and that his current weight was equal to 2 full-grown humans. The fact that Yukina could even swing him despite the pain was a miracle. He assumed their pact had pushed Yukina's physical limits, forcing his arms to use more strength than intended. Graham warned him that he could only manage 3 more swings strong enough to cut through the massive beast. Yukina asked what would happen if he tried a 4th. Graham told him his body would give out. Gritting his teeth, Yukina made up his mind. He would defeat the Kobold King. Charging forward, Yukina prepared to strike. Graham told him to give it his all if he was truly a man. With a powerful swing, Yukina sliced off the Kobold King's left arm. The monster roared in pain and tried to counterattack with its right arm, but Yukina cut it off just as easily. However, his body was already reaching its limit. Graham reminded him that the fight wasn't over, and that he already knew what Yukina would do next. Yukina knew it too, someone was watching him, and if he collapsed now, he would lose his pride. Graham told him to focus on the right timing, accuracy, and fighting spirit. With all his remaining strength, Yukina drove his spear into the Kobold King's chest. The massive creature crashed to the ground with a heavy thud. Graham asked if Yukina was okay. Yukina said the rest of the Kobold pack was still around. Graham told him to rest since reinforcements had just arrived. A few knights were already defeating the remaining kobolds one by one, and Graham called them late. Still, he was glad that the attention was on his master. Relix was surprised to see Yukina. As the fox girl watched him get treated, Yukina smiled. She asked if he was okay, but before he could answer, he collapsed right in front of her. Graham quickly warned her not to move him carelessly. He knew she had questions and doubts, but he told her to set them aside for now and take Yukina to a doctor named Kunai. He was sure she would figure something out to help him. The fox girl understood and followed his instructions. Graham also reminded her not to forget Yukina's stylish spear since it was his master's most treasured weapon. A narcissistic spear indeed. Yukina was not born with any special fate. He just happened to be from the same village as the Great Brave. However, one day people would learn that another hero had been born into this world. This was the beginning of the legendary tale of a young man who worked behind the scenes on the Brave's journey to defeat the Demon Lord and save the world, following his own path and leaving his mark in history. Meanwhile, Kunai thought about her life as someone who worked as a harlot at night. She felt guilty about it and tried to live a better life by working as a doctor during the day. However, after meeting Yukina, she realized that people like him were able to do their best because of women like her. Thinking about Yukina's smile made her smile as well. Then she blushed when she noticed she was acting like a young girl experiencing her first love. Even though she had worked in those professions, she found it embarrassing that she had no real experience with love. She wanted to stay by Yukina's side, but she also felt guilty about the customers she had served in the past. Suddenly, she heard rattling noises outside from a carriage. A fox girl rushed to the door looking for Kunai. When Kunai asked what was wrong, the fox girl begged her to save a man. Kunai tried to calm her down, but her eyes widened when she saw Yukina lying unconscious. Staying calm, she quickly instructed the others to place Yukina carefully on the table. She used her scan skill and saw that his organs were damaged, and both his muscles and bones were torn apart. Shocked, she asked the fox girl why she brought Yukina to her instead of a larger hospital. With the royal soldiers nearby, they could have even gone to the military hospital. The fox girl, frustrated, asked if Kunai would just let Yukina die. Kunai told them to leave, saying there was still time to take him somewhere better equipped. However, deep inside, she was scared. What if she ended up killing Yukina with her own hands? At that moment, Graham spoke up, mocking Yukina's taste in women. He assumed prostitutes were hopeless, only selling themselves and betraying men without hesitation. Kunai shouted that Graham had no idea what she was feeling. Graham agreed. He didn't understand the emotions of a woman willing to abandon a dying man, but he knew one thing. Kunai wanted to save Yukina. She admitted she did. Graham told her to do what she had to do then. Kunai hesitated, afraid that Yukina would hate her if he saw her true power. But the thought of losing him scared her even more. Kunai didn't know who Graham was, but she thanked him for opening her eyes. Graham didn't mind, after all, his partner had once dreamed of dying in the arms of a first-class beauty like Kunai. He apologized for his earlier words, but Kunai still thanked him. Then, she turned to the fox girl and Relix, promising that she would save Yukina no matter what. As the others left the room, Kunai still heard Graham's voice, thanking her for making the right choice, knowing it was a difficult one. Healing magic didn't just use mana, it also drained stamina. since Yukina was severely injured, losing too much life force could kill him. Kunai needed an external source of stamina to share with him. She took off her hair ornaments, her body trembling in pain. A pair of horns appeared on her head. Though exhausted, she knew she had to save Yukina. Then she leaned down, kissed him, and used a skill called transfer. Yukina woke up and quickly realized he was in Kunai's clinic. He noticed a strange mark on his body, mistaking it for a burn, but it was actually his hero stigmata. Graham told him to wake up, but Yukina asked him not to be so loud. Graham joked that Yukina had just taken a really long nap. Confused, Yukina asked who he was, and Graham dramatically introduced himself. Yukina remembered Graham looking like an old, worn-out piece of junk, which made Graham angry. Laughing, Yukina assured him that he already knew who he was. As he started remembering the events that led to him forming a pact with Graham, he suddenly realized he wasn't wearing any clothes. Before he could panic, Graham told him to look to his right. Yukina's eyes widened when he saw two large puddings placed beside him. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling oddly refreshed. Realizing he was still undressed, he jokingly thought he had already stepped into adulthood. Graham quickly told him to calm down because that wasn't the case. He then reminded Yukina to be grateful to Kunai, who had saved him from dying after his severe injuries. Graham also warned him not to wake her up, as she had stayed up for 3 days taking care of him. Yukina finally understood what had happened, but noticed that his body felt even better than before he got injured. Graham told him to hurry up and put on his clothes. Their conversation got so loud that it woke Kunai up. When she saw Yukina's smug face, she sighed in relief, happy that she had managed to save him. Graham whispered that moments like these called for a hug. Though hesitant, Yukina followed his advice and hugged Kunai, apologizing for making her worry. Kunai was surprised but happy that Yukina hugged her on his own. She then admitted that she had come to a realization. She, the most admired woman in the capital, had been influenced by a man who had never even been with a woman before. Yukina apologized, but his eyes were locked onto something else. Kunai quickly noticed and asked if her horns looked disgusting. Without hesitation, Yukina shook his head and said she looked even more stunning than them. She then asked if he really didn't find them creepy. Yukina admitted they were surprising but insisted they didn't take away from her beauty. Kunai went silent for a moment before Graham sighed, calling Yukina's response the worst one ever. As Yukina started worrying that he had said something wrong, Kunai suddenly declared that she couldn't hold back anymore. She looked at him with deep affection and gave him a passionate kiss. Yukina was completely shocked. Kunai then told him to drop the formalities when addressing her. Without hesitation, she confessed her love and kissed him again. Yukina couldn't believe what he was hearing. After some time, Kunai, feeling embarrassed, apologized for her shameful behavior. Yukina said he was both surprised and happy about her sudden confession. Kunai, still covering her face in embarrassment, asked again if her horns really didn't bother him. Yukina reassured her, saying they were no different from the ears and tails of beastmen in his eyes. Kunai then decided to reveal the truth. She admitted that she was from the succubi race, a type of demon that seduced men and absorbed their vitality. At first, she hadn't realized it, but later she learned that she was indeed one of the demons from old tales. She then asked if Yukina had ever wondered why she worked as a prostitute at night. Succubi needed to absorb vitality regularly to survive, and for her the most efficient way to do so was through physical intimacy. However, Yukina could tell that Kunai didn't want to reveal her true identity so easily. Kunai shook her head and explained that because she could steal vitality, she also had the ability to control it. Since it worked like her healing magic, she figured out how to reverse the process, giving vitality instead of taking it. This led her to learn a skill called transfer, something only succubi knew. A few days ago, when healing magic didn't work on Yukina, she shared her own life force through transfer. However, she could only use this ability when her horns were exposed. She needed direct contact with another person to manipulate vitality, which made it difficult to keep her horns a secret. Yukina finally realized how close he had been to death, and thanked Kunai for saving his life. Kunai was simply happy that he was feeling better. Changing the subject, Yukina asked if her earlier confession was serious. Kunai, annoyed, asked if he would have preferred that she kept her feelings to herself. Yukina quickly said it wasn't a problem. He was just confused because it was the first time a woman had ever confessed to him. Since he had approached her for business reasons, he hadn't expected her to have real feelings for him. Before he could say more, Kunai interrupted him with a kiss. She reminded him that he had acknowledged her worth as a prostitute and accepted her as a succubus. She confessed that she loved him so much that she couldn't hold back anymore. To her, he was the most wonderful man she had ever met. Yukina no longer questioned her feelings. Kunai then asked about his own, and Yukina admitted that he liked her, but he wasn't sure if it was the kind of love between a man and a woman. Kunai understood and said she might have gotten carried away with her emotions. She suggested that they take some time to clear their minds. Then after giving him a gentle kiss on the forehead, she told him to visit her at night if he ever sorted out his feelings. Outside, Graham tried to comfort Yukina and even questioned why he hadn't acted bravely. Remembering Kyunai's last words, Yukina regretted not following his instincts. Graham told him to take his time to think and promised to gather his remains later. Yukina couldn't believe his partner had no faith in him. Yukina then took out the Kobold King's fang from his pocket and wondered what to do with it. Graham mentioned that the fox girl had gone through a lot of trouble to get it for him. He said she was strict with others but also with herself, unlike most women. He also suggested that Yukina visit her to say thank you. Suddenly, the same fox girl's ears twitched, and she ran toward Yukina, calling him the hero. She was happy to see him safe. Surprised, Yukina jokingly asked who she was. Then he asked her to keep some distance since people were watching them. The fox girl begged him to listen, but Yukina told her to calm down and stop calling him the hero. Without warning, she placed her sheathed sword in front of him and knelt. She asked him to accept her as his subordinate. Confused, Yukina asked what she meant. The two sat down for a cup of tea, and the fox girl formally introduced herself as Mikaj. Yukina asked her to speak casually, but Mikaj refused, as she insisted on showing respect to a hero. Graham reminded Yukina how stubborn martial artists could be about certain things. Yukina then brought up their unusual situation, how a high-ranked mercenary like Mikaj was working under someone of lower rank. He also asked about the Kobold King, assuming that Mikaj had already submitted the subjugation report. Mikaj formally thanked Yukina for saving her. More than that, as she watched him from behind, she saw the potential of a hero in the making. Yukina understood her words for a moment but quickly dismissed the idea, insisting that he was just an ordinary mercenary and could never be someone as important as a hero. Mikaj reminded him that he could have run away and left her behind during the battle, yet he chose to stay. Yukina claimed it was just luck that helped him win. Mikaj didn't care about that. What mattered to her was that Yukina had saved her. Yukina then looked down at the hero's mark on his hand, remembering Graham's words during their pact. Graham asked if Yukina was unhappy about it, then he pointed out that his words wouldn't get through to the stubborn fox girl. He suggested a trial period where she could accompany him, giving her time to cool down and think things through. Yukina agreed to make Mikaj her subordinate, but only under one condition. She didn't want to take Mikaj's feelings lightly, and suggested they start as companions instead. Mikaj asked if she meant as friends. She then agreed that earning Yukina's trust should come first and apologized for her habit of rushing things. Yukina reminded her that this was only a friendship to decide whether or not she would become his subordinate, and Mikaj understood. Graham, acting like a narrator in a story, announced that the Silver Flash had joined the hero for a limited time and hoped that future history books would record it that way. Yukina could only sigh. When they returned to the guild, everyone gathered around them looking curious and excited. Yukina presented the fang of the Kobold King. The receptionist was surprised at first, but then asked them to follow her to the back room. There she introduced them to Karan, who then introduced himself as someone with a respectable rank in the guild. Mikaj quickly corrected him, saying Karan shouldn't downplay his position as just a decent rank. She explained to Yukina that Karan was a business acquaintance from whom she occasionally received requests in person. Karan then got to the main topic, the Kobold King. He had once received a report from a rank 5 mercenary about signs of a stampede, so he had asked Mikaj to investigate. Graham revealed that the rank 5 mercenary was actually Yukina. The worst-case scenario had come true, but Karan was relieved that they had defeated the Kobold King. He called it a miracle, saying it had prevented many other mercenaries from facing serious danger. Mikaj told Karan to stop avoiding the main point. Karan felt hurt, but still moved on to the real topic. He wanted to know who contributed the most to defeating the monster. Mikaj replied that she had already explained it the day before. Yukina finally understood what was going on. He admitted that he was the one who finished off the Kobold King. Karan thought Yukina had only landed the final hit, but Mikaj made it clear that she had only managed to injure the monster a little. She insisted that Yukina had done most of the work. Karan found it hard to believe that someone who wanted fame would give credit to someone else. Mikaj explained that she was not giving anything away. She had been telling the truth from the start. She said her desire for fame was just a way to reach her goal, but now, she no longer cared about it. Karan asked what she meant. Mikaj then revealed that she had found a master to serve. Her expression, which seemed uncharacteristically soft, left Karan speechless. Embarrassed, Mitch quickly changed the subject back to subjugation matters. Karan pointed out that the wounds on the monster matched Mikaj's usual attacks. Yukina was surprised that he could tell, and Karan explained that Mikaj's weapon was unique. However, he confirmed that the final blow was a deep wound straight through the monster's heart, something that was clearly not Mikaj's doing. Still, he doubted that a rank 5 rookie could have done it either. Mikaj knew they wanted more proof, but she stood by her statement. Yukina was the one who contributed the most. Karan asked Yukina if Mikaj was lying, and Yukina confirmed that she was telling the truth. Seeing how serious they both were, Karen decided to believe them and planned to inform the others. It wasn't that he doubted Mikaj's report, but he still had responsibilities to follow. On top of that, Yukina had technically taken credit for someone else's quest. Yukina wondered if he would be punished for it. However, since it was an emergency, he needed confirmation from someone involved, himself. At that moment, he realized just how troublesome organizations could be. Before Yukina signed the receipt, he asked to transfer part of the reward to Mikaj, which surprised her. He reminded her that he would have died if he had been alone back then, and he never even planned to fight the monster in the first place. He wanted Mikaj to be listed as a collaborator, and sharing the reward was his way of thanking her. Mikaj looked touched. Karen accepted the request. Graham then teased Yukina, calling him a womanizer for giving points to Mikaj. Since Yukina had already defeated a powerful enemy, Karen suggested that he try for a promotion to rank 4. He explained that the staff members thought highly of Yukina because he was more reliable and careful than the other newcomers. However, he still needed to officially take the promotion since he now qualified for it. In the end, the choice was Yukina's. He stayed quiet. That night, as Yukina walked home, Graham was surprised to hear that he had put the promotion on hold. He wondered why Yukina was hesitating, especially since he had already saved enough money to buy Kyunai. In fact, he no longer needed to work as a mercenary for money. Yukina agreed. Yukina stopped in front of the clinic. Graham knew this was Yukina's goal all along and asked if he had made up his mind. Yukina said he had. Graham reminded him not to keep a woman waiting, and Yukina thanked him for the advice. Graham then told him to do his best since he would be watching how things played out. Yukina wondered if he should just ignore that last comment. He knocked on the door and Kyunai asked who it was. Yukina answered that it was him. The door opened and Yukina stepped inside, placing Graham to the side as he looked for Kyunai. He checked the bedroom, but it was empty. Suddenly, Kyunai crept up behind him. Yukina turned around and was surprised to see her wearing an outfit that revealed her pale skin, glowing under the moonlight from the window. She greeted him with a sad expression and said she had dressed up to show how strong her feelings were. Yukina was caught off guard. He reminded her that he was just a countryside boy with no stable job or high status. He wasn't sure if he was the right person for someone like her. Then he asked if she was certain about choosing him. Kyunai admitted that she had been with many men before, but Yukina was the only one she truly wanted to be with now. As a succubus, her instincts made her crave only his touch. However, because of her past as a prostitute, she hesitated and asked Yukina if he could accept someone like her. Yukina paused. He had thought he was sure of his feelings from the start, but he had been too afraid to act on them. He couldn't just stand there and let her question herself like that. Without hesitation, he grabbed Kyunai's arm, showing that he wanted her too. He pushed her onto the bed and they began to embrace. Yukina believed that if he didn't act now, he wouldn't be able to call himself a real man. Looking into her eyes, he told Kyunai that her past didn't matter to him. Whether she had been a prostitute or a succubus, he only wanted her completely. Tears filled Kyunai's eyes as she admitted she felt the same. Meanwhile, Graham, watching from the side, casually remarked that his partner was at the hero level. The thought of that was both exciting and terrifying at the same time. Somewhere, we see Mikaj politely refusing Relix's offer to join the Braves' party. The room fell silent. Worried, Aina asked why, since she had heard that Mikaj originally came to the royal capital for that very reason. Mikaj confirmed it, but explained that she had already found a master she could truly serve. Aina asked who it was. Mikaj said the Braves should already know because they had met before. Her master was there when they first met. Relix then asked if she was talking about Yukina. He confirmed that they came from the same village and that Yukina only came to the royal capital because he had invited him. Upon hearing that, Mikaj thanked Relix, saying that she had met Yukina because of him. However, Relix felt uneasy about the way Mikaj spoke so respectfully about Yukina. Mikaj then stated with confidence that Yukina would become a great hero one day, and she was certain of it. Relix rode back home in a carriage. While looking out the window, he asked Livia about the difference between a brave and a hero. Livia explained that a brave was someone who carried the hopes of the people and saved the world. Heroes could also save the world, but what set them apart was their selfishness. They would do anything to fulfill their own desires, and this drive would change the world in the process. However, Livia hadn't heard of both a brave and a hero appearing in the same place at the same time. She called Mikaj foolish and disappointing for looking up to heroes, who were known for being rude and crude. Relix told her to be careful with her words. Relix then noticed Aina holding her pendant tightly and asked if it was something special to her. Aina blushed and said it was her treasure. Relix was surprised to see the same expression on Aina's face that Mikaj often had. He guessed where Aina's pendant might have come from, but decided to dismiss the idea, thinking that kind of coincidence only happened in legendary tales. The next morning, Yukina smiled as he thought about how important certain things were to him. He understood that Kyunai had worked as a prostitute to support herself, but he didn't want her to be with any other man anymore. Kyunai smiled and kissed him. Then she asked if that kiss had tired him out. Yukina said it didn't. Kunai then told him that the kiss had taken the same amount of energy as if she had spent a whole night with another man. Yukina was shocked, but Kunai seemed more amazed by the power of their love. As long as Yukina was with her, she felt she could keep going. Because of this, she decided to stop working as a prostitute. Yukina then joked that Kunai had a way of making a man feel motivated. He decided to push himself harder for her and take the promotion exam. Kunai assured him that she would continue working as a doctor, so there was no need to worry about money. She also said that it was natural for men to want to look cool in front of women. Later, Yukina introduced Graham to the weapons store owner, who was genuinely shocked. He had never expected to see a weapon with a will of its own. Graham didn't mind that Yukina had told others about him, but he wondered if he was being sold back to the store. Yukina assured him that wasn't the case. He just wanted to confirm something. He then asked Graham who or what he really was. Graham questioned what would happen if he refused to answer. Yukina threatened to have the old man melt him in the furnace. At that, Graham swore to tell the truth. He said it was the right time to explain, but he could only reveal so much. He introduced himself as Graham, the cursed blade once wielded by the hero. Yukina remembered Mikage calling him that before. The old man clarified that the correct term was brave, but Graham explained that braves and heroes were very different despite both achieving great things. Braves fought for others, while heroes were reckless people who fought for their own desires. Yukina asked if that made him a reckless person. Graham told him he was, especially since he had jumped in front of the Kobold King without a plan. However, he also said that Yukina was the kind of reckless person he admired, someone willing to risk his life for a woman. Yukina, however, didn't want to hear a spear confessing its love to him. Graham was a weapon made for people like this, and his only purpose was to give advice about the troubles he had experienced. Yukina remembered that Graham had been the source of his problems lately. However, he wondered why Graham had ended up as a second-hand item in an old rundown shop. The old man who sold it didn't know either. He only remembered buying Graham from a weapon trader he knew, but the trader never mentioned anything special about it. Graham then explained that unless he formed a pact with someone, he would remain nothing more than a useless spear. Yukina asked if he was referring to the hero's mark. Graham clarified that the stigmata would appear on the person he believed was worthy of being a hero. He reassured Yukina that there were no bad side effects. In fact, the mark would bring benefits, and he told him to look forward to them. Yukina then asked what they should do now that they had formed a pact. Graham had no answer. Instead, he reminded Yukina that heroes were people who risked their lives for their own desires. He then asked Yukina what he wanted to do next. Yukina said he only wanted a stable income to live peacefully with Kunai. Graham told him to do just that. Unlike a certain strict person he had known, Graham said his role was not to guide Yukina. After all, weapons existed to serve their owner's goals. He told Yukina that no one was forcing him to follow a set path. He wanted him to live life on his own terms, making bold and selfish choices. That was the reason he had formed a pact with him. He believed that a hero was not chosen by fate, but was someone who made their own choices and took control of them. A week later, some mercenaries rode in a carriage looking at Yukina with disdain. Spear users had always been unpopular, and this time was no different. Graham told him to ignore them, but Yukina noticed more stares than usual ever since the stampede incident. Graham explained that it was natural for heroes to attract attention, and he believed those stares would soon turn into envy. He reminded Yukina that he could only help him achieve his goals, but no one knew what tomorrow would bring. That's why he urged Yukina to give his best effort today. Before long, the carriage stopped and the mercenaries got out. An examiner arrived to oversee the promotion test for rank 4. He explained that their task was to exterminate kobolds. Yukina felt disappointed. It didn't sound as exciting as he expected. However, everyone was shocked when the examiner announced that each mercenary had to defeat 30 kobolds. They were allowed to form groups to meet the total quota, then report back to the guild where the staff would check the body parts as proof of their kills. He also encouraged them to kill more than the required number, promising extra rewards. Yukina and Graham quickly realized that this promotion exam was just a cleanup mission, eliminating the remaining monsters from the stampede that Yukina himself had stopped. The examiner then handed out magic items, instructing them to break them if they were in danger. Doing so would release a smoke signal, and Mikage, a rank 2 mercenary, would rush in to rescue them. However, she made it clear that they should take care of themselves so she wouldn't have to interfere. Yukina wondered what Mikage was up to, and Graham jokingly claimed that she was obviously chasing after him. The examiner said that anyone who used their own magic items would be disqualified. However, he told them they could use them if their life was in serious danger. He also introduced an outside collaborator who would be joining the exam. Kunai then arrived wearing a doctor's uniform, which surprised Yukina. They simply waved at each other without saying a word. After that, the examiner told them to begin. Instead of starting the task, Yukina went straight to Kunai and asked why she was there. Hyunai explained that the guild staff had asked her to come, but she was also worried that something might happen to Yukina again. Yukina assured her that the last incident was rare. Still, knowing how dangerous mercenary work was, Hyunai couldn't help but worry about the person she loved. She had fallen for Yukina because of his strong desire to follow his own path. They were so in love that they didn't even hear Graham reminding them about the exam or notice the people around them watching. Mikaj suddenly appeared, clearing her throat and giving them a sharp glare. Annoyed, she told Yukina to get moving or she would disqualify him. Startled, Yukina quickly got the instructions and ran off as fast as he could. Hyunai silently watched Mikaj, who then turned to her and said she knew about her connection with Yukina. However, since Hyunai was there for official business, Mikaj warned her not to show favoritism. Hyunai reassured her that she was only there to do her job as a doctor and reminded Mikaj to focus on her duties as a supervisor as well. Mikaj was caught off guard and insisted that she was doing her job. Hyunai then recalled how worried Mikaj had been when Yukina was on the brink of death. She assumed something was up and that made her giggle. Meanwhile, Yukina had no trouble dealing with the kobolds. Graham thought it might have been because the kobold king was gone, but he still warned Yukina about the smarter ones. Suddenly, Graham shouted that a mercenary was in danger on the left. Without hesitation, Yukina ran toward the mercenary, impressing Graham. Yukina told him to stop joking and asked what was going on. Graham explained that a wounded mercenary was surrounded by 10 kobolds. The injured mercenary noticed Yukina running toward him and desperately called for help. He swung his sword wildly, but it was clear he was struggling. Yukina called him an idiot as the kobolds moved in to attack. Without wasting time, Yukina told Graham to get ready. He swung his arm back and threw Graham hard toward the kobolds, hitting them right in the head. The attack caught their attention and they turned toward Yukina instead. Yukina called Graham back to his hand and Graham started narrating dramatically, as if he were in a magical girl show. Ignoring him, Yukina swung his sword once and took down 4 kobolds with ease. After the fight, Yukina checked on the mercenary and asked if he was okay. Instead of answering, the mercenary demanded to know what Yukina had just done. Yukina could have explained his call skill, which allowed him to summon Graham no matter how far away he was. This ability came from the pact he had formed, but he saw no reason to explain it. Instead, he told the mercenary to use his imagination and asked about his injuries. Seeing the deep wound, Yukina figured the mercenary would bleed to death if he didn't get treated soon. He asked where the mercenary's magic healing item was, but the mercenary admitted he had dropped it somewhere. Yukina couldn't believe it and searched through his own pockets. The mercenary, confused, asked what he was doing. Yukina told him he would just use his own item instead. The mercenary got upset, saying that as a rank 2 mercenary, asking for help over some weak kobolds would make him a laughingstock later. Yukina was annoyed, but Graham tried to calm him down. Yukina firmly told the mercenary to stop being stubborn since he would die without treatment. The mercenary complained that if he accepted help, he might be disqualified. That was the last straw for Yukina. He reached his limit and shouted at the mercenary to stop whining. Yukina smashed the magic item, creating a loud noise and thick smoke. He believed this would make the wounded mercenary easier to spot. He expected someone he knew to arrive first, but Graham brought bad news. When Yukina asked if another mercenary needed help, Graham instead warned that a juggernaut was heading their way. Yukina was confused. Was that kind of monster even supposed to be in the forest? As heavy footsteps echoed closer, Graham told Yukina to get ready. Yukina took a stance, frustrated and unsure of what was happening. Suddenly, a bull-like monster with long, sharp horns appeared. Yukina recognized it as a hornbull and wondered why it was in this area. The hornbull glared at him, which made him even more confused. This creature was usually calm, so why was it acting so aggressively? Graham pointed at the monster's side, and Yukina finally understood. Some reckless fool had tried to take it down in one hit, but only made it furious. Graham guessed that it was another examinee like them. Since there was no blood on its horns, the attacker must have escaped, leaving the hornbull in a blind rage, searching for revenge. Unfortunately, Yukina got caught up in someone else's mess. Graham explained that once a hornbull got angry, it wouldn't stop until it destroyed everything in its path. It was also too fast for any human to outrun. Yukina decided to hold it off until Mikaj and reinforcements arrived. Graham then reminded him about the extra burden behind him, the wounded mercenary. He asked what Yukina planned to do and even suggested using the mercenary as bait to escape and regroup with Mikaj, but Yukina refused. If he abandoned someone he had already helped, he knew he wouldn't be able to live with himself. Seeing Yukina stand his ground, Graham grinned with excitement. This was exactly why he saw Yukina as a true hero. Yukina lowered his spear and told the hornbull to drop dead. Then he used enchant on Graham. Graham cheered for him, and Yukina shouted as he swung his spear to hit the monster's head. The hornbull's horns cracked like biscuits, and the monster fell to the ground with a loud thud. Yukina could hardly believe how intense the fight had been, but Graham said it was actually easier than before. Enchant was a skill that made Graham's weight more than double. It was a power Yukina had gained along with Call, and he had used it to defeat the Kobold King. Yukina agreed that he didn't feel any pain and wondered if it was because of the pact. Graham confirmed that his presence made Yukina stronger, but he also believed Yukina had natural talent. When Yukina asked what kind of talent, Graham said he would find out soon. For now, he suggested that Yukina eat and get some rest. Yukina told him not to treat him like a kid, but Graham reminded him that he was generations older anyway. Suddenly, Mikaj appeared, and Yukina thanked her for coming. She was surprised that he was the first to use the emergency signal, but Yukina explained that it was for an injured mercenary he had found. Mikaj suggested taking the mercenary to Kyunai, saying he would likely be disqualified. Yukina also mentioned that the Hornbull wasn't their fault. Someone else had foolishly tried to kill it. The examiner then asked if Yukina had taken it down. Yukina confirmed that he had, explaining that if he hadn't, both he and the injured mercenary might have died. The examiner told him to follow him back to the entrance to give more details. Yukina agreed and also pointed out the dead kobolds around the area, saying they were his kills and should be enough to meet the quota. In the end, the troublemaker who messed with the Hornbull got disqualified, and the rest of the examinees passed with flying colors. It was a big step for Yukina. However, not much changed after he was promoted to rank 4. Well, one thing did change. Kyunai now welcomed him home every day, keeping him motivated. Graham also noticed that Kyunai had become busier, and Yukina explained it was because of the recent casualties. After the exam, Kyunai gained a reputation as a doctor. Graham also realized that most of her patients were troublesome men, but thankfully nothing serious had happened so far. Yukina then mentioned that Mikaj was acting as Kyunai's bodyguard, watching over her like a guard dog. Graham was relieved to hear that. Graham then asked Yukina what he planned to do for the day. Yukina replied that it would be the usual monster hunting jobs. However, this time Mikaj would be tagging along. She excitedly ran up to him like a happy pet. Yukina reminded her that they wouldn't be taking on anything too big, but Mikaj just wanted to be part of his team. Yukina remembered they had talked about it before, but mercenaries weren't allowed to take jobs ranked higher than them. That meant Mikaj would have to take a lower ranked job, which would put her at a disadvantage. However, the fox girl didn't care about money since she had already saved up plenty. Yukina felt a little defeated in that regard. Graham pointed out that bringing Mikaj along wasn't a bad idea since she was strong enough to even defeat Yukina himself. Yukina felt another blow to his pride. Feeling down, Yukina realized Mikaj was on a whole different level. Graham then told him that Mikaj was even better at giving advice as a mercenary and suggested learning from her instead. Without hesitation, Yukina asked Mikaj for guidance, and she immediately agreed to help him. Back in the present, Yukina easily defeated several monsters at once. Mikaj praised him for making good use of his spear's special traits. Yukina, however, found her more impressive because she knew so much about weapons. Mikaj admitted that katanas were still her specialty, but she could see that Yukina was improving with his spear. To her, it seemed like someone was guiding him in real time. Just as they decided to stop for the day, Yukina noticed a wound on Mikaj. She was surprised that she hadn't noticed it earlier and apologized. Yukina asked why she was apologizing. Then he used healing to close her wound, and Mikaj was shocked. Yukina was happy that it worked so well. Mikaj asked if he had really just used healing magic. Yukina said it was his first time using it on someone else and was relieved that it worked. Mikaj remembered how difficult healing magic was to learn and how rare it was among mercenaries. She was sure Yukina didn't have it when they first met, which meant he had only learned it recently. At first, she thought he was the type to grow in sudden bursts of strength, but now she realized he improved little by little, step by step. She couldn't believe she was witnessing the growth of someone like him up close. The thought made her blush. Mikaj grew curious and asked where Yukina had learned such magic. Yukina said he had learned it from Kyunai, which surprised Mikaj. He explained that Kyunai was an expert, and that he needed these skills for dangerous missions. He also reminded Mikaj about the person who got injured during the exam, which made him realize it was important to know first aid. For some reason, Mikaj looked troubled and sad. Yukina noticed and asked if something was wrong. Mikaj then told him that it was amazing he had learned so much in such a short time. Yukina admitted he could only heal small wounds for now. He then saw Mikaj spacing out again and asked if she was feeling okay. He suggested taking a break if she needed one, but Mikaj insisted she was fine. Back at the guild, Yukina handed Mikaj her share of the reward and apologized if it seemed like a small amount to her. Mikaj told him to keep the full reward since she had done nothing but space out and cause him trouble. However, since she had been more injured than him, Yukina insisted she take her share. Left with no choice, Mikaj accepted. Yukina was relieved, but he suddenly realized he had spoken to her as if he outranked her. He quickly thanked her for the day and said he hoped they would meet again in 3 days. Mikaj watched him leave with a heavy heart. She reflected on how she had failed to gain points as both an instructor and a subordinate. To clear her mind, she decided to train. Just then, a guild staff member ran up to her. Mikaj asked what was wrong. The receptionist apologized for giving her the wrong reward earlier. It was actually supposed to be more. Mikaj assured them it was fine since mistakes happen. After thinking for a moment, she decided to deliver the extra reward to Yukina herself. She soon found herself standing in front of Kyunai's clinic, wondering if she should just give it to Yukina the next time they met. However, she had already come this far, so there was no turning back now. Tea was served inside, and Kyunai apologized for making Mikaj come to find Yukina. She explained that Yukina would be late because he had some things to take care of. Mikaj apologized too, since she had interrupted Kyunai during business hours. Kyunai told her not to worry as she was closing the clinic for the day, and invited Mikaj inside for some tea. She also wanted to chat with Mikaj. The fox girl looked happy to hear this. Kyunai then shared that she had been worried about Yukina lately because of his reckless behavior. Mikaj said there hadn't been any problems so far. She wondered how many other accidents Yukina had aside from the stampede. Kyunai was glad to see a strong instructor like Mikaj by his side. Mikaj appreciated hearing that. The two girls kept chatting while enjoying the tea. Kyunai served more tea, and Mikaj thought Kyunai was really nice and charming. If Kyunai wanted Yukina to be happy, Mikaj decided she would support the couple. Then Kyunai asked if she could ask a question. Mikaj told her to go ahead. Kyunai asked if Mikaj was in love with Yukina. The surprising question left Mikaj speechless. Meanwhile, Graham had just gotten his usual maintenance from the old blacksmith and felt cheerful. He said the old man was great, and Yukina couldn't help but agree, seeing how happy Graham was. Curious, Yukina asked who had made Graham in the first place. Graham didn't know anymore since it had been so long. In a flat voice, he said he really forgot. Yukina thanked him for the simple answer. Yukina remembered that when Graham avoided a question, he wouldn't answer, no matter how much you asked. Graham quickly changed the subject and asked Yukina what he thought of Mikaj. Yukina was surprised by the sudden question, and Graham reminded him that they had been working together since his promotion. Yukina asked if it was about being a teammate, and Graham said Yukina should know what he meant. Yukina said he had an idea but was worried he'd be wrong. Graham, who had watched many heroes, joked that Yukina's answer might ruin the moment. Based on what he had seen, Graham was sure Mikaj had already fallen for Yukina, since she had saved her like a prince saving a princess in distress. Yukina wondered if he was really like a prince. And Graham laughed, saying the world would end if Yukina actually was one. He then explained that Mikaj was someone who would be loyal to one person, like a dog, and she was also a martial artist who served a lord. Yukina reminded him that Mikaj was a fox, not a dog. Graham said that such loyalty could turn into romantic feelings. Hearing this, Yukina became quiet. Graham asked if Yukina wasn't interested, but Yukina said he was just confused. If he had to choose between liking or hating Mikaj, he liked her, but that was all. Yukina thought it was already a miracle that Kyunai was his lover. He wasn't even sure if Mikaj saw him as a man. Graham told Yukina to be more confident because he was a better person than he thought. Because of this, Kyunai fell in love with him. Yukina blushed and thanked Graham for his kind words. However, Yukina said he couldn't return Mikaj's feelings because he was already with Kyunai. Graham argued that great men can have great lovers, and even in this country there were men with many mistresses. Yukina replied that this only applied to nobles, and for a commoner like him, monogamy was the norm. He also worried that if he dated Mikaj, Kyunai wouldn't be happy. Graham insisted that Kyunai would be fine with it, but Yukina asked him on what basis. Graham chose to stay quiet, but he advised Yukina to balance work and family life. Even if Yukina worked hard for Kyunai, there might come a time when she would leave. Yukina agreed and said that's why he had taken a 3-day break from his mercenary job. When Yukina finally got home, Kyunai greeted him. Yukina was surprised she was still awake. Kyunai said it was still early and their night had just begun. Yukina noticed how excited Kyunai looked, which reminded him of their first night together. Kyunai then invited him over and Yukina couldn't say no. In the bedroom, Mikaj, dressed in light clothing, greeted Yukina. Yukina was surprised to see his teammate and asked what she was doing and wearing. Kyunai explained that Mikaj had copied the outfit from her hometown. Mikaj nervously asked Yukina what he thought of it since it was her first time wearing something so revealing. Yukina confessed that he had felt excited seeing her. Mikaj's ears perked up and she thanked Yukina. Yukina then asked what the occasion was. Kyunai signaled Mikaj. Mikaj hesitated for a moment but then shared her feelings. She asked Yukina to return her affections as well. Kyunai encouraged Yukina to grant Mikaj's wish. Yukina asked if Kyunai even understood what she was saying. Kyunai assured him that she did and that she had even encouraged Mikaj to confess. Yukina reminded her that he no longer wanted a purely physical relationship. Kyunai knew Yukina was surprisingly faithful, but when she saw Mikaj's feelings for him, she felt truly happy. She was glad that another woman understood why she loved him so much. She didn't doubt Yukina's love for her, but wondered if it was okay to keep such an amazing man to herself. She thought it would be nice if Mikage became Yukina's new girlfriend. She reminded him that she was a doctor, not a fighter. But Mikage could help him in battle. Yukina asked with concern if Kunai was okay with this. Kunai said she felt happy, and though it might not be normal, she didn't feel repulsed at all. Yukina wondered if this was just a part of being a succubus. He remembered Graham saying that Kunai would be okay if Yukina went after Mikage. Kunai began teasing Mikage, which made Mikage act more seductive and call out Yukina's name. She said one night was enough for her, and no matter what happened, she would always stay by his side as his sword, ready to serve him until her body could no longer fight. Yukina responded that, while he might not be the hero Mikage imagined or as skilled as she was, he wouldn't back down after hearing a woman say something like that. He admitted that Mikage was incredibly attractive in his eyes. He told her it would be a waste for her to only be his sword, and asked her to give everything she had to him instead. As Yukina reached for a kiss, Mikage told him to accept her loyalty and everything else. The next morning, Relix and a female mage visited Kyunai's clinic. Relix had already found a new swordsman to replace Mikage and also recruited a mage. The next step was to find a healer. He could hardly believe that Mayuri, a young and cute girl, had become the youngest person to earn the title of court mage. Both she and Aina were equally skilled in magic, but since Aina was royalty, Mayuri was the better choice for their party. Relix had no complaints about Mayuri's magic skills, but she seemed to be lacking in another area. He stopped comparing her to Aina, realizing it would be rude. Lavia then snapped him out of his thoughts. Relix asked if it was okay to visit without an appointment. Mayuri assured him that this was the least busy time of the day, and they could always return another time. Just then, Kunai appeared, and Mayuri immediately noticed the difference in their figures. Feeling jealous, she jokingly called it unfair and blamed the gods for the inequality. After calming down, Mayuri apologized for her sudden outburst. Relix mentioned that this wasn't their first meeting and apologized for showing up without warning. He then got straight to the point and invited Kunai to join his brave party, asking for her help in defeating the Demon Lord. Kunai paused for a moment before apologizing. To Relix's surprise, she declined the offer. Mayuri quickly asked why, explaining that joining them would bring her great honor and make her clinic more well-known. Lavia agreed that Mayuri's arguments made sense, but she couldn't help but wonder what was bothering Relix. For some reason, Relix felt a strong sense of déjà vu, as if this situation had happened before. He asked Kunai for her reason. She then admitted that she had someone she loved, someone who accepted her completely, and she couldn't bear to leave his side. At that moment, Relix realized that Kunai was making the same expression Mikage had before. Yukina and Mikage returned home and were surprised to see someone they knew. Mikage casually asked Relix what was going on. When Mayuri saw Mikage, she became depressed again and silently cursed her large breasts. Yukina noticed that Graham was unusually quiet and wondered what was wrong. Relix mentioned that it had been a long time, and Yukina agreed. They hadn't had a proper reunion since Relix got the Holy Sword. This was also his first time seeing the legendary weapon, but for some reason, he felt a strange hostility coming from it. Relix then turned to Kunai and told her to forget about the conversation before walking away. Yukina asked if Relix was hurt, but he didn't respond. Mikage then asked Kunai if it was like hers, and Kunai confirmed. Yukina, curious, asked what they were talking about. The two just giggled and said it was a secret between women. Yukina didn't mind as long as they were getting along. The next morning, Yukina woke up and saw his girlfriend still sleeping peacefully after their night together. As he stared at them, Graham commented that it had been another fun night. Yukina sighed and complained that Graham sounded like an old man. Ignoring the remark, Graham instead pointed out how surprised he was to see Yukina's well-toned body. He felt proud since he was the one responsible for it. Realizing that Graham had changed his body without him even noticing, Yukina finally understood that Graham was truly a cursed weapon. Graham told him to relax, explaining that he had only used enchant to adjust his weight every day. Yukina was shocked that he had never noticed before, but Graham admitted that was his intention all along. Thanks to Graham, Yukina had built up enough stamina to handle 2 women at once without any trouble. Embarrassed, Yukina told him to shut up. As he reached for his clothes, Yukina noticed the ring Aina had given him. He could still remember her beautiful smile and bright red hair. Even though he was now with Kunai and Mikage, he couldn't shake off his feelings for Aina. It was only because of Kunai's sensitivity and Mikage's adaptability that their three-way relationship worked. Still, deep down he felt like he wasn't being completely honest with himself. But he knew the truth. His first love would never come true. He assumed that, with time, his feelings for Aina would eventually fade. Later in the forest, Mikage put Yukina through intense training. Like a strict instructor, she gave him advice on reacting to opponents, counterattacking, and defending himself. However, Yukina made a mistake and took a hard hit from Mikage. Shocked, the fox girl quickly asked if he was okay. Yukina crouched down and began healing himself. Mikage apologized for getting carried away, but Yukina reassured her not to worry. He had told her not to hold back. After some time, Yukina stood up again, and Mikage asked if he was really feeling better. Yukina was amazed at how Mikage could fight against spears even though she used a sword. Mikage explained that her father had trained her in all kinds of martial arts and she was happy to share that knowledge with him. Yukina then suggested continuing their training and Mikage told him to attack whenever he was ready. As they kept fighting, Yukina remembered what Mikage had told him. Once he reached rank 3, he could take on more requests. These wouldn't just involve hunting monsters but also capturing criminals. Graham could give him advice on fighting people, but real experience was the best teacher. He also advised Yukina not to use enchant or call during training with Mikage. Instead, he should focus on improving his natural strength. Yukina had also heard rumors that Relix was even stronger than a rank 2 mercenary. He wasn't surprised, considering Relix was the brave, the one destined to defeat the Demon Lord. As someone who knew him, Yukina couldn't help but feel frustrated. However, he reminded himself to focus on his own training for now. A little later, Mikage shared that the guild had ordered her to take on higher-ranked quests. Yukina realized it was because she had been joining him on lower-ranked ones. However, Mikage said it was her own choice to follow him. For now, she planned to complete 2 or 3 high-ranked quests. She also mentioned that there were some untouched quests, and they would only take her a few days. This was the first time Yukina had heard about untouched quests. Mikage explained that these were missions with targets that were either too strong or too expensive to defeat. Because they weren't profitable, mercenaries usually ignored them. Yukina wished he could go with Mikage, but his low rank stopped him, even though he could easily complete a rank 3 quest on his own. He asked if he should try anyway since he could already finish rank 4 quests alone without needing healing. After hearing this, Mikage agreed that her decision was right. She then started scolding Yukina, warning him not to do anything reckless while she was away. Yukina argued that he should be the one saying that, but Kunai took Mikage's side, agreeing that Yukina was someone reckless. After that, the three said goodbye, but before leaving, Mikage seemed uneasy. Yukina wondered if she had forgotten something. Without hesitation, Mikage suddenly kissed him on the cheek. She then said she was really leaving this time and quickly ran off. Yukina was too shocked to speak, and Kunai commented on how cute Mikage was. Kunai then said she would return to the clinic, while Yukina decided to walk around the marketplace for a while. After that, they went their separate ways. In the marketplace, Yukina walked around alone, feeling nostalgic. Graham reminded him that he wasn't actually alone, which made Yukina click his tongue in response. Graham then said that his feelings were hurt, but Yukina quickly replied that he was just joking. It had been a while since the two of them were alone together. Yukina wondered if calling Graham a guy was even the right term. Graham didn't mind and simply described them as one guy and a weapon. Yukina realized it didn't really matter. Graham was also happy that they could talk freely without whispering, and Yukina felt the same way. It turned out that Yukina hadn't told his girlfriends about Graham yet, though Miak had already sensed that Graham was special. There wasn't any real reason to tell them. Yukina just wanted to keep having private conversations with Graham. Graham then asked what Yukina planned to do for the rest of the day. Yukina grabbed an apple for a snack and said he had no plans. As he looked around, he commented on how much his palace had grown to match the capital's. He didn't have any complaints about his old hometown, but after living in the capital, he had no desire to return to his previous way of life. While snacking, he suddenly remembered his first day in the capital, wandering through the market stalls. Back then, he hadn't met Graham yet. Instead, he had met a red-haired girl. Annoyed, Yukina sighed, frustrated that he was remembering something he shouldn't. Graham asked what was wrong, and Yukina simply said it was just a bittersweet memory from his youth. As he walked past an alley, he saw a group of thugs surrounding a girl. He thought it might be Aina, but told himself that would be too much of a coincidence. Still, he couldn't ignore a girl in trouble, so he knocked one of the thugs down with Graham. Graham had seen the attack coming from far away. Yukina commented on how weak the strike was, and Graham explained that he had made himself lighter before hitting the thug. Otherwise, with Yukina's current strength, the thug's head would have exploded. The thugs turned to him and asked what he was doing, and Yukina asked the same. He told them that if they wanted to be with girls, they should go to a brothel instead. Graham warned him that if he said the wrong thing, he might end up looking like the bad guy. One of the thugs then noticed the spear and asked if Yukina was a follower of the Silver Flash. Yukina replied that it was actually Mikage working for him. Another thug wondered if Yukina was trying to act tough even though his mistress was missing. Seeing the tension rise, Graham tried to calm Yukina down. Yukina gave the thug a headbutt and told him to back off. The man collapsed, unconscious. Graham couldn't believe Yukina had actually hit someone, but Yukina corrected him, saying he had only used his head this time. The other thug tried to punch him, but Yukina caught his fist. The man screamed in pain, and Graham warned him to calm down or his hand would get crushed. Suddenly, Yukina felt something strange in his body. Graham then explained that he had been using enchant on Yukina earlier, which had helped him build his strength. Yukina hadn't even noticed that he had gotten stronger, but there was something more important right now. He turned to the girl and asked if she was okay. She thanked him but sounded unsure. Yukina found her reaction funny and looked at her more closely. Graham agreed, saying any girl would be flustered after seeing a stranger take down thugs so easily. Something about the conversation felt familiar to Yukina. The girl slowly lifted her head, revealing her face from under her hoodie. It was Aina. Yukina couldn't help but scream in shock. The two ran away from the scene and Yukina said they should be far enough. Aina agreed, but her mind was more focused on Yukina holding her hand. Yukina quickly apologized and let go. Watching Aina, Graham couldn't help but think that Yukina's luck with big-chested women had finally run out. Yukina admitted he had been wondering about that himself lately. Yukina then mentioned that it had been a while since they last met. Aina agreed, adding that he had saved her twice. Yukina was just happy she was safe. In his mind, he had wanted to see her again and talk about many things. Now it was finally happening right in front of him. Noticing his spear, Aina asked if Yukina had become a mercenary. Yukina wanted to tell her the real reason but instead made an excuse, saying he needed to earn a living in the capital since he had no education or status. Aina then pointed out that using a spear was uncommon. Yukina replied that he wasn't good with a sword. Feeling flustered, Aina quickly clarified that she didn't mean it as an insult. Yukina reassured her that it was fine, as he was used to those kinds of comments. Setting that aside, Yukina asked how Aina ended up in the alley. Aina struggled to explain, so Yukina assumed she had gotten lost again after sneaking out of her mansion. Aina insisted she had a good reason this time. Yukina noticed she wasn't denying the sneaking part and Aina fell silent. She admitted that last time she had just wanted freedom, but this time she actually had a destination in mind. However, she didn't know which way to go. With no other choice, she asked for directions but somehow ended up being approached by those thugs. Yukina then asked where exactly she had been trying to go. Aina was surprisingly looking for the old man's weapon shop. She asked Yukina if he knew the place, and he confirmed that it had been his favorite shop since he arrived in the capital. Aina was shocked because she knew the old man was famous for only using his skills for customers he personally liked. Even aristocrats couldn't do business with him. Yukina then realized why the old man had ended up buying a shabby spear like Graham. Graham reminded him that he was an ancient and honorable weapon. Curious, Yukina asked why Aina wanted to see the old man. She said she needed a custom-made item. When Yukina looked confused, Aina explained that the old man was a skilled craftsman in many areas, not just weapons. Yukina was surprised since he had always assumed the old man only made weapons. Yukina offered to lead the way, but Aina didn't want to trouble him. However, Yukina pointed out that they had already come this far, so he decided to stay with her. Aina was stunned but took his hand, hoping she could rely on him once again. In the weapons shop, Yukina called out to the old man. The old man couldn't believe Yukina had another girl with him and warned him about the jealous young people. Yukina asked him not to ruin his reputation, but Graham agreed with the old man this time. The old man said he believed that great men made great lovers, but he warned Yukina that the other two girls might turn her head away from him. Yukina asked him to stop, but he couldn't believe the old man was talking at such a bad time. After a moment of silence, Aina took off her hood and the old man recognized her. Aina greeted him like they had known each other before. Yukina realized his job was done. Graham told him it was too late to earn any more favor, but Yukina said he still had a chance. The old man asked Yukina to go outside because he needed to talk to Aina in private. Yukina thought about reporting him to the authorities, but the old man explained it was for business. Aina then told Yukina to wait outside the shop, promising she would scream for help if needed. The old man told her to stop joking and Aina said she was just kidding. The old man seemed surprised by her response. He wondered if Yukina would ever stop chasing women. However, he was more surprised when he saw the crown princess walking into his shop without any guards. Aina explained that she hadn't come with any reliable guards. The old man, amazed by Yukina, asked how they met. Aina explained how she had gotten into trouble once and Yukina saved her, but she never saw him again after that. The old man guessed it was only until today. He wondered if the royal castle was in chaos with Aina missing. Aina said she was ready for it. The old man agreed that she must have had a plan, knowing how smart she was, and he understood she had a reason to sneak out. Aina then mentioned she needed him to make something for her. Outside, Graham asked how Yukina knew someone like Aina. Yukina explained how he had first met her. Graham said it sounded like a perfect love story and joked that he would write a book about it when he retired. But Graham was curious about Aina's noble background, and Yukina admitted he didn't even know her name. Graham couldn't believe Yukina just walked away from a beautiful woman without asking for her name. Yukina asked him not to treat him like a playboy. Graham laughed and asked if Yukina had ever met a two-timer who wasn't a playboy, clearly hinting at him. Yukina covered his ears to block out the question, but Graham used telepathy to ask it again. Yukina said it didn't matter if he knew Aina's name, but Graham could tell that Yukina still thought about her. Yukina went quiet and Graham asked if he wanted to know how he knew. He looked at Yukina's ring and noticed it was a woman's ring. When he looked at Yukina's face, he saw someone who looked like they were in love for the first time. Yukina tried to hide his embarrassment. Graham said Yukina wasn't acting like himself. He used to be the type to rush in and do anything to win the heart of the girl he loved. Yukina explained that he was just a peasant who had recently moved to the capital, while Aina was a noblewoman. The difference in their social status made it seem impossible. Graham understood that Yukina didn't stand a chance back then. He then asked what Yukina planned to do next. Aina came out and apologized for making Yukina wait. She said she only came to place her order and would return later to pick up the finished product. Yukina told her to come with him as he would worry if she got lost in the crowd again. He offered his hand and asked if he could be her bodyguard. Graham commented on how innocent the two of them looked and jokingly called them illegal. Later, Aina said it was worth sneaking out after eating a meat skewer. Yukina asked if she couldn't eat such things at home, and Aina said she didn't enjoy the meals much because they were strict. She was happy to eat freely. Yukina told her to enjoy it. Suddenly, a little girl tugged on Yukina's shirt and cried, asking where her mother was. Yukina said that was a good question and picked her up. He told her to cry as much as she needed to. Aina called him compassionate. Graham joked that Yukina caught the lost child like a Pokemon. Yukina apologized for ruining their date, but Aina said she was fine with it. He gave candy to both the girl and Aina, telling the girl to enjoy it while they looked for her mother. Aina mentioned that Yukina seemed used to handling kids, but she didn't do well with them. Yukina explained that he came from a small village, but it was his first time helping a lost child. Aina suggested going to the security post, and Yukina agreed it was a good idea. Noticing the girl's blank expression, Yukina asked what was wrong. The girl then asked if the two were a couple since they seemed to get along well. Yukina wondered if that was true. Aina stayed quiet for a moment before saying they weren't a couple. She explained that her father already had plans to marry her off to someone else. Hearing those words felt like a sharp knife stabbing Yukina's chest. The girl soon reunited with her mother, and both Yukina and Aina were happy about that. However, an awkward silence followed. Aina then said she had spoken the truth. She would be engaged to a man chosen by her father in the future. She asked if this was a shock to Yukina. Aina added that, being the daughter of her family, she knew her marriage wouldn't be her choice. Yukina asked if she was okay with that. Aina replied that resignation won out before she could feel rejection. She had no choice but to accept it. However, right now, she suddenly felt reluctant. The time she spent with Yukina was the only time she could be herself, without worrying about expectations or obligations. It was the only time she could do what she wanted, like holding Yukina's hand tightly. Yukina thought Aina already knew he had two girlfriends. Aina confirmed that the old man had told her. Yukina said the two girls were great on their own and didn't deserve him. He had promised to make them happy. In his mind, Yukina realized that his words sounded selfish. But this way, he could keep a distance between the two of them. He told Aina that at that moment he didn't belong to anyone and was just himself. Aina, with tears in her eyes, agreed. Yukina then said this was the end, and Aina agreed. For now, Yukina would let go of her. But if the pain he felt in his chest also affected Aina, and if some kind of miracle happened, he would take the chance. And that was the end of Yukina and Aina's story, at least for now. Mikaj, another mercenary, and a mage fought against monsters with all their strength. Relix used his enchant skill and quickly defeated a mantis monster. Mikaj decided to temporarily join the Brave Party, which was also in the guild. She had no reason to say no, especially since the guild officially invited her. She was also curious about Yukina, who was from the same village, and thought she could learn more about her from the Brave Party. Mikaj was impressed by how easily Relix took down the steel mantis. Mayuri, the mage with the group, was also impressive as a rank 2 mercenary. Sion, the priest, complained about getting the short end of the stick, but his support spells and accurate casting were really good. As for Gerbert, a rank 1 mercenary, he was strong, but in Mikaj's eyes, Relix stood out the most. His growth was incredibly fast. Mikaj joined the party to see how strong the man was, the one she had originally planned to serve, but what she found went beyond her expectations. She realized Relix was truly the hope of humanity, the brave. Suddenly, Mikaj saw a surprise attack aimed at Relix. Relix tried to defend himself, but his sword was knocked away. Mikaj rushed to help, but Gerbert stopped her, saying there was nothing to worry about. Then, Relix summoned his holy sword, and Lavia appeared shining in his hand. When Relix summoned his holy sword, it reminded Mikaj of how her master used to call his spear Graham. In an instant, Relix defeated the monster in front of him. Mikaj couldn't find many similarities between Yukina and Relix except that they both came from the same village. Yet for some reason, the two seemed to overlap in her mind. She wondered what kind of brave Relix was and how he differed from a hero like Yukina. After her mission, Mikaj went to Yukina to deliver Relix's message. Yukina was happy to hear that Relix was doing well. He was surprised to learn that Mikaj had teamed up with Relix, but was glad she had returned to his side. Mikaj, however, felt uneasy. She worried that her feelings had wavered after working with Relix, but she was relieved to find that her loyalty to Yukina remained strong. Yukina noticed that Relix was growing unusually powerful. Graham mentioned that those chosen as Braves were already broken in some way. Yukina wondered if Graham's knowledge about Braves came from his creator. Still, he was pleased that Relix was handling his duties while Yukina focused on his own. Yukina's personal goal was for Relix to defeat the Demon King. He wanted to create a peaceful world where Relix could become a man worthy of Kunai and Mikage, and live a comfortable life in retirement. Graham, however, told Yukina to forget about a quiet life, as it wasn't in his future. Annoyed, Yukina swore he would throw Graham into a furnace once he retired. Later, at the Mercenary Guild, Mikage was shocked when Yukina chose the simplest quest: goblin extermination. Yukina, irritated, told her not to underestimate goblins. He agreed that goblins were weak and didn't provide valuable materials, but their ability to reproduce quickly was dangerous. If left unchecked, their numbers could explode, especially if they had already built a nest. Mikage wondered if Yukina was overestimating the threat. Yukina explained that while goblins were no problem for experienced mercenaries, they could be a serious danger to amateurs. Yukina asked the receptionist how long the goblin extermination quest had been posted. The receptionist said it had only been a week. Yukina guessed there were already casualties. He scolded the receptionist for not taking such quests more seriously and rushed out of the guild. Confused, Mikage ran after him and asked for an explanation. Yukina apologized for his outburst and explained why goblins were so dangerous. He told her that goblins often lived near human villages because they survived by raiding and plundering. Mikage finally understood but wondered how Yukina knew so much about goblins. Yukina said goblins were common in rural areas. Before heading out, Yukina stopped at a weapons shop and bought a machete for fighting in tight spaces like caves. The shopkeeper also gave him a dagger as a good luck charm, saying he didn't want any loyal customers to die. Yukina thought the dagger looked too expensive to be a simple gift, but the old man insisted he take it and told him not to lose it. Yukina had no choice but to agree. In the carriage, Kunai pouted and said she would have been upset if they had turned her away. She mentioned that if a village had been attacked, some injured villagers would likely need healing. Yukina agreed but looked concerned. Kunai then asked if Yukina thought of her as weak and delicate. She told Mikage to throw an apple toward her. Instantly, the apple flew to the wooden wall beside Yukina and split in half, revealing a hidden knife. Kunai showed her knives and explained that prostitutes don't become famous just by charm and tricks. She assured Yukina she wouldn't be a burden. Suddenly, the coachman shouted and told them smoke was rising from the village. Everyone looked out of the carriage and Mikage sniffed the air, confirming she could smell blood. Yukina asked how long it would take to reach the village and the coachman said it would take 10 minutes on foot. Yukina told Mikage, who was fast, to go ahead. He then instructed the coachman to return to the royal capital and inform the mercenary guild that the village was under attack by monsters. When the coachman asked about them, Yukina casually said they would stay to work. When they reached the village, Kunai saw how terrible the situation was. Yukina told her to follow him and asked Graham to sniff out the enemies. Graham confirmed no humans were nearby and seeing only a few corpses guessed the attack had happened recently. He said the remaining humans were in the center of the village, and the monsters were heading there too. Yukina told Kunai to go with him to the village center and she agreed, sensing no life in the area thanks to her succubus powers. Kunai urged him to save as many people as possible to honor those who had died. Soon they found a horde of goblins. They fought their way through, killing the monsters blocking their path. They regrouped with Mikage, who was protecting villagers hiding in the church. She told Kunai to heal the injured and leave the monsters to her and Yukina. Mikage admitted she had realized her immaturity as Yukina's insights had saved everyone from being massacred. Yukina told her to focus on the monsters and keeping the survivors alive. Graham then shouted that a large group of monsters was coming. Yukina easily killed many of them and Mikage cut others into pieces. However, Yukina's spear got stuck and a monster tried to attack him. Graham reminded him about his spare weapon. Yukina used his machete and killed the monster, glad he had brought it. Graham told him to stay focused because more monsters were coming. Yukina complained about their numbers. Just then, Graham said he had good news and even better news. Yukina asked for the good news first. Graham explained that the number of goblins had dropped a lot, and the ones left were coming their way. The better news was that the boss leading the goblins was also heading toward them. Yukina didn't understand how that was better news. Graham told him that if the boss was defeated, the goblins would lose control, just like what happened during the last stampede they had faced. Yukina wondered if the boss was a goblin king or something like that. Suddenly, Mikage told Yukina to look to the side, and they saw a troll that seemed to be leading the monster group. Graham said the fight would be easier if someone else handled the smaller monsters. Kunai came back and offered to help. Graham suggested that Mikage fight the troll while Yukina and Kunai focused on the goblins. Yukina didn't agree with the plan because he had a better idea. He lifted Graham and asked Mikage which was stronger, a kobold king or a troll. Mikage said it was probably the kobold king. Yukina then told Kunai he was about to do something risky and asked her to handle the aftermath. Graham asked if Yukina was really going to do what he thought. Yukina said he would and used enchant to make Graham heavier. He threw Graham as hard as he could, aiming to hit the troll. Instead of hitting its body, Graham struck the troll's head and the troll fell to the ground with a loud crash. The girls and the goblins were stunned. Yukina started yelling in pain and asked Kunai to heal him. Mikaj was shocked and apologized for not paying attention. He said he couldn't leave the cleanup to her and called Graham back. Graham returned to Yukina's hands, saying he loved his bold moves. Yukina told him to stop joking around, but Graham said he should thank him instead. Yukina admitted he didn't expect to hit the troll's head. Graham said he had adjusted his path a little, but most of the throw was Yukina's skill. Kunai finished healing Yukina and called him reckless. She jokingly warned him to be ready for what awaited him when they got home. After that, they made one final effort to defeat the remaining monsters and helped heal the injured villagers. That night, the group rented a room. Mikaj agreed that the whole situation was strange. Even if the mercenaries ignored the goblin problem, the kingdom's army regularly cleared out nearby areas to prevent further trouble. Yukina then asked about the stampede. Mikaj explained that the mercenary guild usually took over when the military wasn't involved. However, Yukina still found it odd that the number of goblins had suddenly increased, despite the regular cleanups. Mikaj then questioned where the troll had come from. Kunai mentioned that the villagers said they had never seen one in the area before. Yukina guessed that it had wandered into the region and ended up with the goblins. It wasn't unusual for a troll to lead goblins, but he had never heard of them setting up a base to attack humans. Trolls usually attack directly instead of coming up with complicated plans. For now, he decided to take care of the goblin nest and figure out the rest the next day. The next morning, the girls were ready, which relieved Yukina. Just then, a carriage arrived. A messenger from the guild handed a letter to Mikaj. She had been ordered to return to the royal capital immediately for an urgent mission. Mercenaries sent as reinforcements would take over her current task. She was to join a counterattack against a monster horde heading toward the royal capital. She was shocked to read this. Kunai and Yukina realized something was wrong. The messenger asked Mikaj to take the carriage back while explaining things along the way. Mikaj looked at Yukina with concern. Yukina then said he would go too. Since everything was settled, Kunai decided to join as well. The messenger hesitated and asked if Mikaj was bringing her servant along. In an instant, Mikaj had her blade at the messenger's throat and demanded to know who the servant was. Kunai worried about Mikaj's short temper, and Yukina agreed that she could be reckless. He told her to stop, and Mikaj finally pulled back. She warned that she wouldn't tolerate such insults to her master again and made it clear that everyone was misunderstanding their roles. She also pointed out that Yukina was the one who defeated the troll. The messenger didn't believe it since Yukina was only a rank 4 merc. Mikaj argued that rank didn't determine skill and asked if the messenger was doubting her. Later in the carriage, Yukina gave Mikaj a stern look. She apologized, but he lightly chopped her on the head as punishment. He told her he didn't care what others said about him, but he worried about her sudden outbursts. Mikaj promised to be more careful. Yukina then patted her head. At the guild, Yukina got the same doubtful stares as always. Instead of going inside, he decided to wait outside. Mikaj apologized before heading in. Left alone, Yukina had Graham with him, so he asked him to listen to the discussion inside. The briefing was about the sudden monster attacks the day before, which were getting closer to the royal capital. Fortunately, security had been strengthened, and the first wave was defeated without trouble. However, new types of monsters kept appearing one after another. At first, they thought it was a stampede, but the variety of monsters suggested otherwise. Realizing how serious the problem was, the mercenary guild was asked to help, and all rank 2 and above mercs were ordered to mobilize. Yukina wondered why they hadn't seen any monster corpses on the way. Graham explained that the monsters were coming from the other side. Yukina doubted that such an attack was natural. Graham said it was only possible through summoning magic. He explained that summoning magic was a high-level spell, and even calling over 100 monsters was difficult. Yukina guessed that someone was controlling the monsters. Graham doubted a human was behind it, but said there was nothing to worry about since Brace and his group were on their way back to the royal capital. Yukina could only hope he was right. Meanwhile, Relix worried about the royal capital as he traveled back. Mayuri told him not to worry because soldiers were always stationed there. Gerbert added that not only soldiers and royal magicians would take action. Since the situation was serious, he believed the mercenary guild would also get involved, and the kingdom would likely send them a request. Mayuri remembered that mercenaries were required to help in emergencies. Gerbert confirmed this, explaining that rank 2 and higher mercenaries would be punished if they refused. Most of the time, they were either demoted or expelled. However, he knew that those who reached high ranks loved fighting monsters, so they wouldn't back down. Mayuri then asked what the church did in these situations. Sion explained that they acted like the mercenaries. Since Relix was joining, the church would set up field hospitals and gain recognition by saving lives. Mayuri didn't like the idea. Sion admitted that the church had many sides and was a mess on the inside. Relix noticed that Sion seemed different from other church officials. Levia confirmed that while Sion had the skills of a priest, his way of thinking was likely the reason the church pushed him aside. Relix agreed. Just then, their coachman announced that they had arrived at the royal capital. Meanwhile, Graham asked Yukina what his plan was. Yukina asked for more time to think, but Graham told him there was no time left. At that moment, high-ranking mercenaries walked out of the meeting room. Mikaj ran to Yukina to report something, but he cut her off, saying he wouldn't go with them. He decided to stay in the capital and not take part in the battle. Mikaj was speechless for a moment but then seemed to understand. She simply nodded and left, leaving Yukina behind. Yukina wandered through the empty streets. He soon spotted Kunai and asked where she was going. She told him that a field hospital had been set up near the city gates. Then she asked about Mikaj. Yukina explained that Mikaj had gone to fight the monsters while he stayed in the capital. Kunai paused, realizing what he was planning, and told him to stay safe. Yukina said the same to her. Graham then called the two girls the best, and Yukina agreed, thinking they were wasted on him. Graham asked Yukina what he was up to. Yukina said there was no hidden meaning behind his actions. He just didn't like being part of a boring crowd and had a sudden gut feeling. Even though he called it boring, he actually thought it was pointless to do the same thing as everyone else. Graham admitted he didn't understand. Yukina then pointed out that everyone was too focused on what was happening outside. He figured that if someone was watching from the inside, it could be dangerous. This was a gamble. And since no one else was betting on this possibility, the chances of him being right were higher. Yukina reminded Graham about the monsters that appeared through summoning magic. Since no one considered this possibility, and even if he was wrong, nothing would be lost. However, Yukina's guess was correct. He soon found someone using a magic circle in a hidden part of the royal capital. Graham confirmed that it was indeed a summoning magic circle. Yukina realized things were more serious than he thought and immediately killed the hooded figure without hesitation. Graham called him ruthless for not even trying to get information first. Yukina admitted he wasn't capable of doing that. Graham then confirmed that Yukina had made the right decision, as the hooded figure turned out to be a demon. Yukina expected to be criticized later, but in the end, he was proven right. Graham asked him to check the demon's neck, where Yukina found a cult symbol. The emblem showed a shattered sword, which was the kingdom's symbol for the brave. This meant the dark cult was against the brave. Yukina then understood that the demon wasn't just some innocent bystander. Graham was surprised that the demons had the courage to set up summoning magic circles inside the city. He confirmed that the magic circle wasn't finished, but with a small adjustment, monsters could start pouring out. He told Yukina exactly where to strike. Yukina hit the spot and the magic circle lost its power. He hoped this wasn't just a waste of time. Graham then showed his respect for Yukina's instincts even though he had expected them to be useless. Yukina was surprised by Graham's honesty. Graham explained that most people didn't care about taking meaningless actions, but Yukina was the type to waste time when necessary, and he found that impressive. Yukina wasn't sure if he was being praised or not. He then asked where their next target was. Graham was confused at first, but quickly realized that there was no way only one summoning magic circle had been set up. Yukina said he wanted to check every part of the capital. However, he had something to do first. He pulled out a magic item he had received from the promotion exam. He hadn't expected it to be useful, but now it was. Graham couldn't help but be impressed. Yukina then smashed the magic item, creating a loud bang and thick smoke. Graham confirmed that it was loud enough for those in the palace to hear. Yukina hoped so and then moved on to his own mission. A few minutes ago, an official praised the brave, but Relix asked him to skip the formalities and explain the situation. The official confirmed that the monsters in the area were weak and that magic circles had been spotted. Mayuri assumed they were for mass summoning, and the official agreed. Relix suggested destroying them, but the official explained that the area was overrun with monsters and that they needed Relix's help. Without hesitation, Relix agreed to join, and the official was relieved, mentioning that some mercenaries had also offered their support. As Relix looked around, he noticed Mikaj passing by and called out to her. He asked if she was joining the assault team, and she confirmed. He then asked about Yukina, and Mikaj told him that Yukina had stayed in the capital. Hearing this, Relix felt uneasy. Mikaj explained that Yukina couldn't participate because he was only a rank 4 mercenary. However, Relix couldn't believe that Yukina hadn't even tried to help. He had always seen Yukina as a man of justice, even if he lacked common sense. The thought of Yukina staying in a safe place while others faced danger shocked him. He felt betrayed. Realizing that the person he once considered a friend had sent someone important to him into a dangerous situation. Levia then remarked that calling such a person Relix's friend had been a mistake from the start. Mikaj, however, questioned if Relix was misunderstanding something. She insisted that Yukina's decision to stay behind wasn't because he was afraid, but because he believed it was necessary. When Relix asked what she meant, Mikaj admitted she didn't know. Yukina had made his decision and she had no choice but to follow it. Relix argued that it would have been better if Mikaj had stayed with Yukina in case something happened in the capital. Mikaj believed Yukina had thought of that too, but still chose to remain behind alone. She knew he often prepared for situations that seemed unnecessary, but sometimes they turned out to be the right choice. She said that was just the kind of person Yukina was. Someone who sent her away so she wouldn't waste time following foolish orders. Relix struggled to understand Mikaj's words. He had no idea what Yukina was thinking. He knew that no one would praise Yukina for his decision. Instead, people would likely criticize him. If nothing happened, everything Yukina did would seem pointless. Relix couldn't understand how Yukina could make such serious choices. Suddenly, Mikaj's ears perked up. She turned around and said the unlikely event had happened. She decided to return to the royal capital and asked Relix to inform the commander that she would no longer be part of the assault team. She assured him that he could handle things in her absence, especially since he had a rank 1 mercenary by his side. Gerbert questioned her decision, warning that she could be punished for breaking the rules, and that people might spread rumors about her running away while the brave was fighting. But Mikaj simply stated that she didn't care at all. Without another word, Mikaj left. Just then, Mayuri reported that their preparations were complete. Relix agreed to move forward as planned and prepared to inform the commander about Mikaj's departure. At that moment, a messenger ran in, shouting that monsters had started appearing inside the royal capital. In a flashback, Aina had requested a special sword to be made. The old man at the weapons shop looked at the blueprint and asked what kind of sword it was. Aina reminded him that she was making this request to the very man who had crafted the sheath of the holy sword. In this kingdom, there was an old tradition of giving a sword to someone you loved. Offering a sword, which symbolized the kingdom, meant entrusting one's life to the other person. Normally, men were the ones who gifted the sword to the women they loved, but Aina had chosen to do it herself. She planned to give it to the brave, the man she was supposed to marry, in an attempt to sever her feelings for the one she truly loved. However, she never expected to see that man again. When they met for the second time, Aina realized just how strong her feelings for Yukina had become. She could no longer suppress them, but by then, her future had already been decided. Her body and duty belonged to the brave. Even so, she wanted to give the sword not to the brave, but to the man she truly loved. She found comfort in the thought that he would have her sword. Besides, she had heard that Yukina already had 2 lovers. Deep inside, she secretly wished she could be part of that love as well. Suddenly, she snapped back to reality, realizing she had drifted off in the middle of an audience in the throne room. She quickly apologized and asked for the report to continue. A soldier stepped forward and reported that monsters had been spotted inside the royal capital. They had also discovered several summoning magic circles. Aina immediately realized that the monster wave outside had only been a distraction. She then asked about their unit's condition, and the soldier confirmed that there were no casualties. The monsters had been dealt with easily thanks to a signal flare that allowed them to act in time. The king then questioned whether the magic division had failed to detect such a thing. A representative from the magic division explained that the summoning circles had only just been set up. If they had been deactivated earlier, they would have been detected. The king ordered the soldiers and magic division to work together to locate and destroy the summoning circles. The men acknowledged the command and left at once. Turning to Aina, the king praised her for her wisdom and quick thinking. Aina, however, dismissed the compliment and told him to act as a proper king instead. The king chuckled and advised her to relax, warning that the brave might lose interest in her if she continued acting so serious. Aina simply told him not to worry about that, but her face grew sad. Noticing this, the king assumed she was unhappy about her engagement. Aina denied it, saying it wasn't true. The king then revealed his plan to officially announce her engagement to the brave once everything was settled. He asked if she had any objections. Aina answered that she had none, saying there was no greater honor than being engaged to the world's savior. But deep inside, she knew she was lying to herself. Her heart had already been given away, to the man who had received her sword. She could only hope that Yukina had accepted it without trouble. Somehow, the king sensed that something was off. Suddenly, a soldier reported that the brave had joined the assault team outside. However, there were also reports that some mercenaries, including a rank 2 fighter, had left the operation and were heading back to the royal capital. Surprisingly, the rank 2 mercenary in question was the Silver Flash. Aina was shocked that someone with a strong sense of duty would suddenly make such a decision. She then remembered how Mikaj had talked about finding a lord to serve, and how Relix had mentioned someone named Yukina. Aina then asked if the reported signal flare had been seen from outside the capital. The soldier confirmed it. Aina assumed that Mikaj had likely spotted the flare and guessed that the person who realized something unusual was happening inside the capital was Yukina. However, she wondered how the mastermind behind this event had planned the setup for the summoning magic circles. The king then said that the culprit probably didn't expect the magic circles to be destroyed so soon. Aina agreed and pointed out that the kingdom had been tricked into focusing their forces outside the capital, while the enemy planned to attack from within. The king admitted it was a simple but effective strategy, though he was unsure who could have come up with it. For now, he decided to focus on stopping the enemy's plan rather than figuring out who was behind it. He also mentioned that setting up magic circles both inside and outside the capital would have taken a long time, and no one would go through such trouble without a deeper purpose. Hearing this, Aina suddenly realized the enemy's true target. It was their castle. Meanwhile, a young boy was being chased by a monster. He had gone outside out of curiosity and now found himself in danger. As he ran, he tripped and the monster loomed over him. Just then, someone rushed in and saved him holding a spear. Yukina then scolded the boy, calling him a brat. He grabbed him and knocked on the door of a nearby house, threatening to kick it down. A woman finally opened the door and Yukina asked her to look after the child. Graham was relieved that they had arrived on time and mentioned that he would later teach Yukina about caring for survivors. Yukina, however, said he had no time to waste, and asked Graham for the location of the next magic circle. After destroying the 6th magic circle, Yukina complained about how many there were. Graham suggested they could ask the summoners themselves, but Yukina dismissed the idea, saying he would rather knock them out than ask questions. Since he was working alone, he couldn't afford to waste time talking. Besides, he noticed that after destroying the 5th circle, the monsters had stopped appearing, which meant the enemy's preparations were complete. Graham then asked what they should do next. Yukina admitted he wasn't sure, but he knew he needed help. Just then, Graham shared some good news. Armed soldiers were on their way. A familiar soldier appeared and Yukina immediately recognized him. Graham explained that this soldier had been part of the group that rescued them during the stampede, along with the brave. The soldier then questioned why a mercenary like Yukina wasn't outside with the others. Yukina simply replied that he was a lower rank and wasn't required to join the assault team, so he stayed behind, doing his usual mercenary work. The soldier then asked if Yukina was the one who had fired the signal flare. Yukina felt relieved that the soldier understood the situation. The soldier explained that they needed extra help and asked how many people were aware of what was happening. He confirmed that they had encountered monsters and magic circles along the way. They had also received reports about demons being involved. Yukina was glad the military at least knew the basics. Casually, he mentioned that he had already taken down 2 demons himself. He then asked how many magic circles they had destroyed so far. The soldier replied that they had taken out 4. Yukina did a quick count, adding the ones he had destroyed, and concluded that made 10 in total. The soldier was shocked to hear that. Yukina then asked Graham how many magic circles were needed to cover the royal capital. Graham estimated that 20 would be more than enough. Since half had already been destroyed, there should be 10 left. Yukina felt relieved that the workload was now shared and decided to work together with the military. Suddenly, Mikaj came running toward him, calling his name with several mercenaries following behind her. Yukina was surprised and asked why she had returned. Mikaj apologized for making him wait. He quickly corrected her, saying he wasn't waiting for her, and asked what she was doing. Mikaj explained that she was the one who had prepared the signal flare during the exam and wouldn't miss it. Yukina then asked about the defenses outside the capital and the people behind her. She told him that the Braves party was there and that the others had followed her without question. Yukina assumed these mercenaries were hoping for a bigger reward. Still, he chose to see the bright side. They had more manpower now. Just then, Kunai arrived panting. Yukina couldn't believe she had come as well. Pouting, she said she had seen the signal flare and ran over. As his lover, it was only natural for her to be by his side. Yukina asked about the field hospital, and Kunai reassured him that there were plenty of doctors taking care of things. Somehow, having both of his lovers beside him gave him a boost of energy. Mikaj then asked about the current situation, and Yukina promised to explain everything on the way. Just as he was about to give instructions to the military, Kunai interrupted, pointing at something in the sky. Yukina looked up and saw a massive screen made of magic. On it, the king appeared. But what truly shocked Yukina was the familiar face standing beside the king. Aina had once thought that her father's suspicions might be right, and by now the castle was probably already under attack. Just then, she noticed a black-haired man being led into the throne room by another noble. Aina and her father immediately understood what was happening, and the king ordered one of the soldiers to approach him. At that tense moment, a soldier suddenly burst in, reporting that demons had been spotted in the capital. 2 of them had already been found dead near the castle. Aina couldn't believe how terrible the timing was. Just as she was processing the news, the black-haired man glared at her and pulled a magic stone from his pocket. Without hesitation, he smashed it. shocking everyone around him. Aina quickly responded with a fireball, but the man had a defensive spell that protected him. As the smoke cleared, the man's long ears became visible. He casually remarked on how rough Aina's welcome had been, then turned to the noble beside him and complained that things weren't going as planned. The noble defended himself, explaining that they had no choice because most of the magic circles in the capital had already been destroyed. Aina's worst fears were confirmed. There was indeed a traitor among them. The man then stated that they had no other option since most of the kingdom's defensive forces were outside the capital. He introduced himself as Niels, a servant of the great demon king. The king found Niels's introduction oddly polite and ordered him to leave at once. However, Niels refused, claiming that he had come to put on a grand show to celebrate the resurrection of the great demon king, and they were all invited to take part. Suddenly, monsters began emerging from Niels's shadow and a large bird landed on his shoulder. He explained that this special creature could project whatever it saw to another location. He wanted the entire royal capital to witness the downfall of the kingdom. As he spoke, a massive screen appeared above the castle, catching the attention of Yukina and the others. Niels sat still as his monster slaughtered everyone in the throne room. Occasionally, he flicked away soldiers himself. As more and more monsters appeared, some soldiers tried to escape, but Niels quickly shut the doors. He explained that he had already placed barriers on all the doors and windows, trapping everyone inside. Aina found Niels terrifying. He wasn't even sweating despite holding up the barrier, fighting off soldiers, and blocking her spells all at once. After a while, Niels drew his sword, deciding that things were getting boring. The soldiers rushed to protect the king and Aina, but with a single slash, he cut them down effortlessly. Seeing this, the king made a decision. He would fight, giving Aina a chance to escape. Even if he died, he wanted her to carry on their royal lineage. It was time for the younger generation to take over. Aina tried to stop him, but the king charged at Niels. The demon was amused and even honored that the king himself had stepped forward. The king aimed for Niels's neck, but the attack didn't faze him despite the king's strength. The king warned him not to underestimate him. He was still the ruler of his nation. Niels smirked and said killing the king alone would be too dull. Since Aina was watching, he decided to make it a spectacle by killing her first, forcing the king to witness her death. Without hesitation, he shoved the king aside, slamming him into the wall. The impact left the king badly injured. Aina rushed toward her father, but before she could reach him, Niels had already turned his attention to her. Seeing his attack coming, she quickly put up a barrier. However, she was no match for his magic power. Overwhelmed, she was thrown back and crashed onto the floor. Niels's shadow loomed over her as he raised his sword, aiming at her. He remarked that he had no real desire to kill a beautiful woman like Aina, but he needed to offer a sacrifice to his demon king. Aina gripped the necklace that Yukina had given her long ago. At that moment, the entire throne room shook as if an earthquake had struck. Niels stood frozen in shock, wondering what had just happened. The shaking continued, followed by a loud banging sound. Suddenly, the ceiling cracked open. Aina looked up and saw the man she loved staring down at them. Niels was stunned that someone had managed to break in. Yukina used this chance to strike, thrusting his spear toward Niels. The demon dodged, but Yukina quickly followed up with a powerful punch, sending Niels flying across the room. Yukina then reached out his hand to Aina and asked for her name. However, he realized it would be rude not to introduce himself first. So he told her he was just a humble villager from the Braves' hometown, now working as a mercenary. Touched by his words, Aina finally introduced herself. Yukina smiled and told her that her name was Beautiful. Hearing this, Aina blushed, tears of joy running down her face. At that moment, Niels got back up. Yukina then made a bold decision. He declared that he would make Aina his no matter what. He didn't care if she was royalty or if monsters and demons stood in his way. He vowed to defeat anyone who tried to stop him, daring anyone with a problem to face him in battle. In her mind, Aina remembered hearing that Yukina was destined to become a hero someday. She wasn't sure where she had heard those words before, but now, she believed them with all her heart. Graham laughed at how reckless Yukina had been and praised him for following up with a quick punch. He was also surprised that Yukina had thought about breaking the ceiling since the doors and windows were blocked. Now let's go back a bit. When Yukina reached the castle, he found that the doors and windows were sealed by barriers, so he decided the best way in was through the ceiling. As they moved, Yukina told his girlfriends about Aina, how he first met her, and how his feelings for her grew over time. He had expected them to be upset, but instead they chose to support him. He realized they were like Graham. They had already sensed that he had feelings for someone else. He thought he had kept it a secret, but it was clear his emotions had already been exposed. He couldn't help but feel grateful to them. Mikaj and Kyunai entered the throne room next, and Yukina asked them to take care of Aina. Then he turned to Niels and vowed to defeat him. Seeing the girl he loved injured filled him with rage. His face twisted into a villainous expression as he threatened to crack open Niels' skull and use his teeth like dice. Graham, shocked by his words, pointed out that Yukina was acting like the villain now. Niels summoned more monsters to attack Yukina. However, Yukina, filled with anger, was too strong and easily wiped out the monsters with a single swing of his spear. This caught Niels by surprise, but Yukina wasn't finished. He leaped toward Niels. The demon blocked his spear and asked who he was. Yukina simply said he was just a villager passing by. Niels assumed Yukina was lying, but in reality Yukina was being mostly honest, though even he had some doubts about himself. Graham was pleased that Yukina was beginning to question himself even just a little. Yukina, however, told him this wasn't the time for jokes. Graham then told Yukina to retreat when he gave the signal. He started a countdown. The moment Graham signaled, Yukina quickly backed off, causing Niels' attack to miss. Seeing Niels caught off guard, Yukina went for a counterattack while Graham instructed him not to stop. Frustrated, Niels warned Yukina not to underestimate him and struck back with force, pushing Yukina away. The impact hurt and Graham snapped at him to stop zoning out and slam his spear into the ground. Yukina followed the advice, increasing his spear's weight before slamming it down. The force made Niels step back, calling Yukina stubborn. Catching his breath, Yukina admitted to Graham that he was barely holding on. Graham reassured him that they had stalled long enough. Reinforcements had started arriving from the ceiling, and the others were now free to move. Niels scoffed at Yukina's poor fighting skills but admitted his physical strength was impressive. Yukina braced himself as Graham warned him that Niels had just finished warming up. Now the real fight was about to begin. Yukina regretted not ending the battle earlier. Niels, now more curious, admitted that he had thought the brave would be the one standing in his way, but now he wondered who Yukina really was. Yukina reminded him that he never gave a clear answer. This only made Niels more frustrated, wondering if he could force the truth out of him. Graham quickly warned that an attack was coming. Niels suddenly appeared in front of Yukina and swung his sword. Luckily, Yukina blocked it just in time and even managed to push the demon back a little. Niels quickly realized that they were equal in strength, but when it came to skill, he had the upper hand. Yukina, however, brushed off his thoughts, saying no one asked for his opinion. Yukina didn't want to rely on a certain move, but in the end he asked Graham to do it. Graham agreed, knowing there was no other choice, and pushed enchantment to its maximum power. Niels, who was holding back the spear, suddenly felt its immense weight. Yukina then used all his strength to swing the spear with full force, causing his own bones to crack under the pressure. Graham noted how tough Niels was, but Yukina reminded him that this wasn't the time to praise the enemy, especially when he himself was on the brink of collapsing. Seeing Yukina struggle, Niels took the opportunity to attack again, but Yukina barely managed to block in time. Noticing his exhaustion, Niels pointed out how weak Yukina looked after his sudden power boost. Yukina fired back, saying he didn't want to hear that from someone who looked pale all the time. Niels sighed, disappointed that Yukina wasn't as capable as the brave. Yukina told him to shut up. Graham warned that if the fight dragged on too long, things would get worse since Yukina couldn't call for backup. Everyone else was already busy fighting. Graham reminded him that this was the moment to stand his ground and stay strong. Niels smirked, calling Yukina stubborn. Spotting an opening, he kicked Yukina hard in the torso. Yukina groaned in pain and dropped to all fours. Even so, he forced himself back up, which impressed Niels somewhat. He acknowledged Yukina's determination but pointed out that by now, Yukina must have realized he couldn't win. He then asked why Yukina kept fighting, even though he knew the outcome. Niels kept questioning why Yukina was resisting so much and going to such great lengths. He then asked why he couldn't kill Yukina even after winning the fight. Frustrated, he continued attacking, but Yukina managed to block his strikes. As Niels kept slashing, he angrily wondered why Yukina wouldn't fall, even though he was covered in wounds and the gap in their skills was clear. Niels couldn't believe he was struggling against a human like him. Then for the first time, Niels got wounded. Yukina laughed, proud that he finally landed a hit. Niels questioned if Yukina was getting stronger as they fought. Yukina thought about it and realized he had improved in handling Graham. He no longer needed to use the weight augmentation all the time. Instead, he learned to increase the weight at the exact moment his spear clashed with Niels' sword, reducing the strain on his body. As the spear became lighter, the tip moved faster, allowing Yukina's attacks to land more easily. Graham warned him not to get too confident since his chance of winning had only increased from 30% to 50%. Yukina agreed. He knew that if things continued this way, he still wouldn't win. Strangely though, he didn't feel like losing either. Niels asked what was driving Yukina to fight so hard. He wondered if Yukina was trying to be like the brave. Yukina denied it, saying his reason wasn't something grand like that. Niels then asked why he fought. Yukina smirked and said that the women he loved were watching him, and he couldn't embarrass himself in front of them. Niels was surprised by that answer. Without hesitation, Yukina attacked with full force. He threw his spear but Niels dodged. Yukina then pulled out his machete but Niels easily shattered it. Niels called him reckless, but Yukina wasn't done. He still had his dagger. He lunged forward and slashed at Niels' face. Seeing his chance, Yukina called back Graham and ordered him to tear Niels apart. Yukina gritted his teeth and thrust his spear forward. Niels tried to block with his sword, but it shattered. The force of Yukina's attack sent Niels flying. Yukina stood still, calm and composed. Everyone watching, including Aina, was shocked and amazed by his strength. Mikage walked up to Aina before she could say anything. She introduced Yukina as the lord to whom she had sworn loyalty, saying he would one day become a hero. Then Kyunai approached Aina, admitting she felt jealous. She pointed out that Yukina was fighting for the crown princess, and knowing how deeply he cared for Aina made her envious. However, she promised herself she wouldn't lose when it came to her own feelings for Yukina. Even though he was injured, Niels stood back up and admitted he had underestimated Yukina. Yukina was surprised. He had hoped that his last attack would end the fight. Graham then spoke, pointing out that Niels was already badly hurt and had lost his weapon. He explained that a demon's weapon was made from materialized mana, meaning its strength depended on the demon's spiritual power. Since Niels' sword had been destroyed, it proved that Yukina's willpower was stronger. However, Graham warned Yukina to stay alert. Niels' expression showed that he still had a trick up his sleeve. Yukina asked if they could end the fight there. Niels admitted that while Yukina wasn't the brave, he was just as dangerous. Yukina then asked what he planned to do next. In response, Niels activated a magic circle beneath his feet. He revealed that he had been saving his trump card for a battle against the brave, but he could no longer hold back. He decided to use all his power to destroy Yukina. A huge black dragon rose from Niels' shadow, letting out a furious roar. Niels announced that this was his strongest monster, the evil dragon Fafnir. Yukina felt a chill run down his spine and thought he might be in serious trouble this time. But unlike him, Graham was thrilled to see a real dragon and called it incredible. Worried, Yukina asked why Graham was so excited. However, Graham understood something. Yukina had never truly experienced the feeling of losing a fight. Strangely, Yukina agreed. He knew he probably couldn't win against such a powerful creature, but he just needed one more thing, and he felt like he could still push forward. Suddenly, he heard Aina calling his name. When he looked at her, she was staring at him seriously. Yukina was caught off guard. Kunai and Mikage also watched him with hopeful eyes. At that moment, something clicked inside him and his hero stigmata began to glow. Graham sensed it too and said that something was coming. The girls cheered for Yukina, telling him to win. Yukina smiled, suddenly feeling confident that victory was within reach. Graham grew even more excited as a surge of energy rushed through him. He shouted that it had arrived. He declared that Yukina was a true warrior and a hero who always found his strength when it mattered most. Standing before a mighty opponent with the support of those who believed in him, the hero rose to the challenge. Yukina agreed. No matter who he faced, he always fought for the same reason. If he couldn't answer the cheers of the women he loved, then he would have failed as a warrior and as a man. With excitement in his voice, Graham finally admitted that he had been lying all along. He revealed that he was never really a spear, but he no longer wanted to hide the truth. Now that he had found Yukina worthy, he was ready to show his real form. Even though Yukina was still inexperienced, Graham believed he was the hero he had been searching for. As a reward, Graham granted Yukina access to his true form, a weapon fit for a hero. Then, in a way that almost sounded like a magical transformation, Graham revealed his real appearance, a dark sword called Balmung. This was the very same sword that, according to Norse mythology, had once slain the dragon Fafnir. Realizing he was in serious trouble, Niels panicked and ordered Fafnir to kill Yukina immediately, but Yukina refused to back down. As Graham encouraged him to fight with all his strength and carve his name into history, Yukina declared that he would destroy anyone who dared to harm the people he cared about. With one powerful swing of Balmung, Yukina sliced the dragon clean in half. The creature's massive body split apart like a curtain being torn open. Niels stood frozen in shock, unable to believe that his strongest weapon had been defeated in a single strike. Meanwhile, Graham continued speaking, declaring that this was only the beginning of Yukina's legendary tale. People cleaned up and repaired the damage left after the battle. Meanwhile, Yukina found himself kneeling in the throne room before the king. He felt out of place but wasn't sure why. Graham told him to endure it, saying his actions had been important enough to be summoned. He also reminded him to take pride in it. A week had already passed since Yukina collapsed after defeating the dragon Fafnir. Relix and his team arrived afterward and took control of the situation. However, they barely missed capturing the demon Niels. Still, since very few humans had been hurt despite all the chaos, it seemed unnecessary to worry too much about the escape of a single demon. The broadcast had been cut off when Yukina destroyed the demon's sword, so no one saw the moment he sliced the dragon in half. Instead, rumors spread that he had only stalled for time until the brave arrived. In the end, the people weren't entirely wrong, and Yukina didn't bother correcting them. However, Mikage was frustrated by how things turned out. The king then told them to raise their heads. When Yukina looked up, he saw Aina. now looking every bit like the princess she was. He was momentarily mesmerized, but Graham quickly reminded him to focus on the king. The king acknowledged Yukina's great efforts, saying that without him the kingdom would have suffered great losses, and both he and his daughter might not have survived. He then formally thanked Yukina. Yukina wasn't sure how to respond. He wondered if a simple "you're welcome" would be enough, but Graham handed him a script. In a dull tone, Yukina recited that it was an honor more than he deserved. Graham sighed and told him to at least show some emotion next time. The king felt guilty for not sharing Yukina's achievements with the public. Mikaj flinched, but Yukina held her back. The king reminded them that Niels had been the vanguard of the Demon King. Letting the people know that the brave had driven him away would give humanity hope for the coming battle against the resurrected Demon King. He apologized, explaining that politics worked this way. Yukina wasn't surprised. He had already sensed that something was off about how things had happened so far. Still, the king wasn't ungrateful. Even if the public had to know, he wanted to show his respect. He asked Yukina what he wished for and promised to grant it if it was within his power. Yukina looked at Kunai and Mikaj. His girlfriends gave their approval. He then admitted that he didn't want status, money, or fame. There was only one thing he truly desired. With confidence, he asked for the king's daughter, the crown princess Aina. Everyone was shocked, and the king asked if Yukina understood what he meant. He offered to make Yukina his personal soldier, or give him enough riches to live comfortably for the rest of his life. However, Yukina firmly stated that he only wanted Aina. The king explained that his daughter was an extraordinary girl, and he had already planned for her to marry the brave. At that moment, Yukina realized this was the arranged marriage Aina had mentioned before. He then said he would leave if his wish was not granted. The king asked if he would refuse any reward at all. Yukina responded that his feelings for Aina were not something that money or fame could replace. The king was stunned and faced a difficult decision. He admitted that he was not the kind of person to break his promise, especially to someone who had played the biggest role in saving the kingdom from disaster. However, he struggled to find a reward that could match what Yukina wanted. He then asked why Yukina desired Aina so much. Without hesitation, Yukina confessed that he loved her. The king was silent for a moment before turning to Aina and asking for her thoughts. Aina then asked if Yukina still had the short sword. Yukina wondered if she meant the one he carried and pulled it out. The king was shocked when he saw it. Aina then admitted that she had given the sword to Yukina. The room filled with murmurs, leaving Yukina confused. The king asked for confirmation, and Aina declared that her feelings were true. She confessed that she loved Yukina and that his wish was also her wish. From the bottom of her heart, she had longed to be with him. Yukina blushed upon hearing her words. Graham then teased Yukina, asking if he was getting excited. He explained an old custom, offering a sword to the person you had chosen to give your heart to. That was why everyone was so surprised. At that moment, Yukina realized that the short sword he had received was actually a love letter. The king asked about Aina's engagement to the brave. Aina wondered if that really mattered. She explained that the engagement was only an idea from the royal family and was never made official. Since there was no real agreement, no promises were broken. She then asked her father to consider a different perspective. If she and Yukina were married, it would create a strong connection between him and the nation. Yukina had fought on equal ground with a demon and even sliced a giant evil dragon in half with a single strike. Aina asked if there was anyone else in the country who could achieve such incredible military feats. Graham remarked on how impressive Aina was. The king admitted that forming a bond with Yukina could benefit the country in a different way than an engagement with the brave. However, no matter how appealing the idea was, he pointed out that Yukina was just a commoner, while Aina was royalty. He was certain Aina understood the issue. Aina responded that she knew exactly what it meant. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dared to reveal her feelings for Yukina. Seeing her determination, the king reminded her that she had the right to the throne. But if she married Yukina, she would lose that right. However, the king already sensed that Aina had no interest in ruling. Yukina, feeling uneasy, asked if this meant Aina would be cut off from her family. The king assured her that it wasn't that extreme. Yukina then said there was no problem at all. The king understood this and, in the end, decided to grant their wishes. Both Aina and Yukina were shocked by his decision. The king told them not to be so surprised. Yukina admitted he expected the king to be much harder to convince and to set strict conditions. The king explained that the only condition was that Aina would lose her claim to the throne. Besides, this was the first time he had seen his serious daughter, who rarely asked for anything, follow her heart. As her father, it warmed him to know she trusted him. Though it might have been a questionable choice as a king, as a father, he believed it was not the wrong one. Aina was deeply moved. The king formally told Yukina that he had high hopes for his future, and asked to be invited to the wedding. He had no plans to cut ties with him as family. After the audience with the king ended, Yukina attended the victory party. Once it was over, he returned to his room looking exhausted. He lay on his bed and complained about how tired he was. Graham commented on how worn out he seemed. Yukina admitted he was jealous of Graham, who had been the only one taking it easy. Graham reminded him that weapons weren't allowed at parties anyway, and Yukina agreed. Graham then asked how things went, and Yukina replied that nothing special had happened. Putting that aside, he mentioned how stunning Kyunai and Mikage looked in their dresses. Aina was also breathtaking. Graham could only watch as his partner bragged about the women around him. He told Yukina that he should have been the star of the party, but Yukina didn't like that kind of attention. He had been doing his best to stay out of trouble, yet he still ended up exhausted. Just as he was about to sleep, someone knocked on his door. Annoyed, Yukina wondered who it could be. When he opened the door, he saw Relix standing outside. The two went to the balcony and Yukina asked why Relix had come to his room so late at night. Relix said it was nothing important. He just wanted to talk since they hadn't gotten the chance during the party. He thought it was a good time to catch up. Yukina agreed and asked where they should start. Relix said there was too much to talk about and he wasn't sure where to begin. He finally brought up the rumors about Yukina getting engaged to Aina. Yukina admitted that it was true. Relix congratulated him. Yukina then reminded him that he had technically stolen Relix's future fiancée. Relix agreed that some might see it that way. He admitted that Aina was beautiful and someone he respected, but he had already known that Aina loved someone else. Yukina was relieved that Relix had no hard feelings about the engagement. He wouldn't have given Aina up anyway. Relix then said Yukina was really something else. Yukina was surprised by the sudden comment. Not long ago, he had been just an ordinary villager, but now he was engaged to a crown princess. Yukina asked if Relix was teasing him, but Relix denied it. He said he truly found it amazing that Yukina had left the village with nothing and had made it this far on his own. Yukina paused for a moment before saying he hadn't done it alone. He had Graham, Kyunai, Mikage, and even Aina by his side. Meeting them had shaped who he was. But Relix insisted that it was still Yukina's own efforts that had brought him here, and he admired that about him. Yukina said Relix was giving him too much credit. Relix disagreed. He said he had always known what kind of person Yukina was. Somehow, Yukina always found himself in the middle of everything. He was the only one who noticed what no one else did. Relix admitted that he admired this about Yukina, but at the same time it made him feel unbearably frustrated. Relix had been working hard to become the brave in his own way, and many people had recognized him for it. However, Yukina was always the one who received the highest praise, even though no one had expected much from him. This time was no different. Yukina explained that it was simply because the results proved it. He said he had only prepared for something that ended up happening, and things just worked out in his favor. But Relix pointed out that Yukina was always 2 steps ahead when it truly mattered. He always delivered the best results at the most important moments. By the time Relix arrived at the royal castle, the battle was nearly over. All he did was fight the demon briefly and drive it away after Yukina had already defeated it. He remembered that it was the same situation with the Kobold King. However, Relix knew it had been like this since their time in the village. He admitted that he wasn't looking for praise while striving to become the brave, but for a long time he had felt jealous and envious of Yukina. That was when Yukina realized why Relix had brought him along to the royal capital. Relix confirmed that he had seriously considered bringing someone familiar with him, but at the same time he had also wanted Yukina to recognize him. He had hoped to prove himself by taking on the role of the brave. However, he felt disappointed that Yukina never paid attention to him. Yukina apologized for that. Deep down, Yukina felt guilty for not admitting his true reason for coming along, to spend time with a beautiful woman. Relix said it didn't matter anymore. If anything, he had only brought Yukina with him to make him notice him. They had started their journey from the same place, but since Relix was chosen as the brave, he believed he had an advantage over Yukina, who was just a simple villager. Yet somehow Yukina had managed to reach his level, or even surpass him. Relix wasn't just talking about battles, but also about allies. Yukina knew he meant Mikage and Kyunai. Relix understood that Yukina had realized both girls were originally selected as candidates to join him on his journey as the brave. But by the time he met them, they had already sided with Yukina. Once again, Yukina had beaten him to it. Relix regretted bringing Yukina to the royal capital. In the end, he felt like a fool watching Yukina achieve what he had wanted for himself. Relix, frustrated, grabbed Yukina and demanded to know how a simple villager, someone who wasn't even the brave, managed to come this far and even stand ahead of him. He questioned what made them different. He wanted to know the difference between a brave and a hero. Yukina had always been called a hero, but he never really understood what that meant. He remembered how Graham explained it. Braves were chosen ones, while a hero was someone who chooses. That was all he knew. Yukina then turned the question on Relix, asking why he fought. Relix answered simply because he was the brave. Yukina pressed further, asking why he did his duty as the brave. Relix, confused, asked what Yukina was trying to say. Yukina pointed out that Relix only did it because the gods had chosen him. But before that, Relix had been the leader of their village's vigilante corps. Yukina guessed it was because Relix wanted to repay the villagers for raising him. Relix confirmed it and asked what was wrong with that. Yukina admitted it was admirable, at least as far as human behavior went. Relix then asked why Yukina fought. Yukina made it clear, he fought for himself. That, he claimed, was the key difference between them. Relix paused for a moment, saying he didn't understand. Seeing his confusion, Yukina rephrased the question. He asked why Relix became the brave in the first place. Relix answered that he had been chosen by the goddess. It wasn't something anyone could just wish for. But Yukina didn't care about the goddess. Instead, he asked whether Relix actually wanted to be the brave. Relix struggled to find the right words. Yukina pointed out that Relix had always been someone who gave everything to fulfill the wishes of others. Some might call that noble. But in Yukina's eyes, Relix was just acting like a puppet. Relix, angered, demanded to know if Yukina was calling him a puppet. Yukina confirmed it, and Relix's frustration boiled over. He insisted he had free will and wasn't controlled by anyone. Yukina then asked if Relix had ever hesitated when he was chosen as the brave. Saving the world was a huge responsibility. Had he ever doubted it even for a moment? Relix admitted that he had struggled with the decision. He had worried about leaving the village unprotected and felt guilty about leaving behind the people who raised him. But Yukina could see that Relix had never actually questioned being chosen as the brave. Angrily, Relix told Yukina to stop nitpicking everything he said. He argued that his parents in the village had pushed him to make the choice, and that was why he became the brave. Yukina, however, pointed out that Relix had still let others decide for him. Furious, Relix grabbed Yukina by the collar. Yukina was surprised. He had never seen Relix wear such a violent expression before. Even Relix himself hadn't expected to feel this kind of anger towards someone. Yukina calmly stated that no matter what, Relix always put others first. That, he said, was why Relix was never good enough. That was the difference between them. While Relix acted for others, Yukina acted for his own desires. Relix worried about what would happen if other people's wishes went against Yukina's. He asked if Yukina wasn't afraid of being criticized. Yukina called Relix a goody two-shoes. Relix wondered if Yukina was making fun of him, but Yukina reminded him that he always did things his own way, and never cared about what others thought. Relix then asked why Yukina had fought the demon. Yukina simply said it was because the woman he loved was in danger. Relix pointed out that this was just like him, doing things for the sake of someone else. But Yukina made it clear that Aina wasn't just someone else. She was already a part of him. The same went for Kunai and to him the girls were all his and a part of who he was. If they were ever in danger, he would do whatever it took to protect them. Relix called him ridiculous. Yukina pushed away Relix's hand and claimed that, in the end, Relix only fought as the brave because he had no choice. None of his actions were truly his own. Relix tried to deny it, but Yukina pointed out that becoming the brave and being chosen as the brave were two different things. He warned that if Relix didn't realize this, he would eventually fall apart. Relix asked why that would happen, but Yukina just said he would never stop being himself no matter what. Then he asked Relix if he wanted to stay the same person forever. Relix admitted he didn't know the answer yet. Yukina told him he would never reach his level if he didn't figure things out. Feeling tired, Yukina tried to excuse himself and kicked the blankets off. But Relix had one more question. Yukina wondered if it was the same thing as before, but Relix, looking nervous, said it was something different. He asked a hypothetical question. If Yukina's wishes ever clashed with his own, what would he do? Yukina smirked and said the answer was obvious. Whether it was royalty, demons, the demon lord, or even the brave himself, if anyone stood in his way, he would push through with force. Shortly after, Yukina visited his usual weapons shop. The old man asked why he had come. Yukina explained that he had overdone things the other day, leaving his gear in ruins. He placed a pile of gold coins on the counter along with his broken armor. Then he asked if he could afford a new set of armor with his current budget. The old man examined the damaged armor and could tell it had been well used. Yukina mentioned that he had received a generous reward from the king and thought it was the perfect time to replace his equipment. The old man understood, took the armor, and walked away, saying he would be right back. Yukina tried to remind him about the payment, but the old man ignored him. A moment later, the old man returned with a new set of armor, just as Yukina had asked. At first, Yukina thought it was the same as his old one, but Graham pointed out that while the design was similar, the details were different. He explained that the quality was much better than before. Then he made a remark about the king having some interesting ideas. Yukina, confused, asked what the king had to do with this. Graham revealed that the new armor was made from materials taken from the evil dragon Yukina had sliced in half. The old man confirmed this, explaining that a messenger from the royal castle had visited a few days ago and left the materials with him. The king had specifically ordered him to use them to craft armor for Yukina. It had been a long time since he had worked on something this important, so he was proud to call it one of the best items he had created in a while. He then instructed Yukina to try it on. As Yukina put on the armor, the old man explained that it felt similar in weight and comfort, but it was much sturdier than the previous one. It was also resistant to fire and cold. He mentioned that it would be rare for a rank 2 mercenary to own such high-performance armor. Yukina agreed that it didn't feel much different except that he felt safer wearing it. Graham was impressed. He couldn't believe the old man had created something like this in such a short time. The old man admitted that making the armor had been exhausting. He had to use magic flames for heating, alchemy for transmutation, and his hammer to shape it, all at the same time. If they had made even a single mistake, the armor would have remained frozen in an incomplete state. They had worked non-stop through the night to finish it. Hearing this, Graham realized that the mage and alchemist involved weren't just ordinary people. He assumed they must have been high-class experts. Then, curious about the old man's abilities, he asked who he really was. The old man said that everything was in the past now. He used to work as a blacksmith for the royal castle, and the people helping him were his old friends from that time. They hadn't spent time together in a long while, so they were excited to work on the armor. Yukina had expected the old man to have such a background. Graham then mentioned that the armor's price was as much as a mansion. Yukina was shocked to hear such a high price. Graham explained that it was made from top-quality materials and crafted by highly skilled workers. It was the kind of item that could be passed down as a family heirloom. Even if Yukina provided the materials himself, the labor cost was still very expensive. Yukina turned to the old man and asked if regular customers like him got a discount. The old man said there was no discount, but under one condition, he could give the armor for free. Yukina thought that sounded extreme and hoped the old man wouldn't ask for anything dangerous. The old man assured him it was something simple. He explained that a messenger from the royal castle had asked him to return all leftover materials to Yukina. If Yukina gave those materials to him instead, he would make the armor free of charge. Yukina wondered if it was really that easy. The old man added that even the leftover materials were still valuable monster parts, and he would earn more than enough money from them. Feeling relieved, Yukina and Graham agreed to give him the materials. Since Yukina was also being summoned by the king, he excused himself. Later at the castle, Yukina met the king in person. The king was happy to see him. Somehow, Yukina spoke in a formal way, which made the king burst into laughter. He told Yukina not to be so stiff and to see him as his lover's father, not as a king. Yukina muttered that this was exactly why he felt nervous. The king then asked if Yukina's rewards were not enough. He said it would be dishonorable as a king to reward the hero who saved the country with only a single girl. He asked Yukina what he truly wanted. Yukina then brought up Mikage and her punishment for leaving the assault team during the mission. Even though Mikage had her reasons, she was still a mercenary who broke the rules. However, she also played a big part in saving the kingdom. Yukina asked if the king could use his authority to dismiss her violation. The king laughed and said it was an easy request. However, he was surprised by how modest Yukina was, as he had assumed he would be more greedy. Yukina joked that a truly greedy person wouldn't have asked for a princess as a reward. The king laughed again, admitting that Yukina had a good point. Then Yukina asked a serious question. He reminded the king that he came from a low background and already had 2 other women in his life. He wondered if the king wasn't worried about giving his daughter to someone like him. The king's expression changed, and he asked if Yukina lacked confidence in making his daughter happy. Feeling flustered, Yukina swore that he would do everything he could to keep Aina happy. The king then placed a firm hand on Yukina's shoulder and admitted that he wasn't in a position to judge. After all, as a king, he had many mistresses because it was his duty to leave behind several heirs to continue his bloodline. Since Aina was born into royalty, the king was sure she would understand Yukina's situation. More importantly, as Aina's father, he knew that Yukina's love for his daughter was sincere. So he asked him to take good care of her. Yukina promised that he would make sure Aina stayed happy by his side. Soon after, at the mercenary guild, everyone was shocked by Aina's strong presence. Her appearance stood out from head to toe. The guild became excited when they saw a beautiful woman walk in. No one could believe that Yukina had managed to bring in another beauty. Some even joked about whether there was a bounty on Yukina's head. He was surprised that their jealousy could create such an intense atmosphere. Yukina had a reason for bringing Aina to such a rough place. Aina insisted that she couldn't rely on him forever, especially now that she had been demoted from a princess to a commoner. She was determined to support herself, which led her to the mercenary guild. When Aina approached the receptionist, they hesitated and asked if her name was really Aina. They quickly apologized, explaining that it was rare for anyone to have the same name as the country's princess. Aina simply confirmed it. Graham, standing nearby, called her bold. He pointed out that no one would expect a real princess to come to a place like this. Her fearless attitude made it even less likely that anyone would believe she was the same Aina from the royal family. He wondered if she was naturally this way or if she was being strategic, but either way he found her intimidating. The receptionist then asked if Aina truly understood what it meant to be a mercenary. Aina answered that mercenaries took on jobs from clients and earned money in return. The receptionist agreed, but then asked if she was prepared for violence. Aina excitedly confirmed that she was. saying she was confident in her magic skills. Seeing her enthusiasm, the receptionist gave up and handed her a contract to read and sign. The registration didn't take long, and Yukina assumed Aina was ready to start taking on jobs. He asked the receptionist if there were any good requests available. As the receptionist showed him a list, something caught his attention. A few days later, Yukina apologized to Aina for making her take on a boring request as her first job. Thanks to Yukina and the others, they managed to keep the damage to a minimum when the goblins attacked the village. However, many buildings and supplies were destroyed. The kingdom chose to ignore the situation, as all its troops were assigned to protect the royal capital first. Because of this, Yukina took on a request to help rebuild the village. The royal capital provided the supplies, while mercenaries were responsible for transporting them and helping with reconstruction. Aina respected Yukina for taking the initiative, even though he had called the request dull. Despite losing her right to the throne, Aina couldn't ignore the struggles of the people. Yukina was happy to see her eager to help. At that moment, Aina realized she hadn't properly introduced herself yet. She turned to Kyunai and Mikage, assuring them that she wouldn't cause any trouble as their junior. Kyunai giggled and welcomed her to the team. She felt a little bad for not getting a carriage fit for a princess, but Aina reminded her that she was no longer a princess and wanted to be treated like a normal girl. Hearing that, Kyunai decided to be more casual with her. On the other hand, Mikage remained stiff toward Aina. She vowed to protect her at all costs and told Aina she could use her in any way she saw fit. Yukina noticed how tense Mikage was and suggested she relax. However, Mikage couldn't do it. To her, Aina was still of royal blood, and as a martial artist, protecting someone from the royal family was a great honor. Yukina then reached out and patted Mikage's head and ears, making her blush and look flustered. He agreed that honor was important, but he advised her not to be too stiff or she would exhaust herself. Mikage suddenly focused on Yukina's hand, looking embarrassed. Yukina wondered if she wanted to be petted more. Graham confirmed it. Kyunai found Mikage's reaction adorable and shared the moment with Aina. Aina was surprised by this side of Mikage, considering how serious she had seemed when they first met. Kyunai agreed. Mikage, noticing them whispering, asked what they were talking about. Instead of answering, Kyunai and Aina playfully attacked her ears. Watching the girls bond, Graham commented that Yukina's harem was forming a peaceful relationship. Yukina quickly told him not to call it that. Still, he was relieved to see everyone getting along. Later, in the village, mercenaries worked on their tasks while unloading supplies. As Yukina built some foundations, a few villagers came running in. One man recognized Yukina and couldn't believe he had come to help with the reconstruction. He remembered that without Yukina's help, they wouldn't have survived. He called Yukina their savior and hero. However, Yukina told him not to mention it, saying he was only doing the job he was hired for, and that calling him a hero was an exaggeration. More villagers noticed Yukina and started gathering around him. They were amazed that someone so young had saved their village and complained that he hadn't told them he was coming. Mikage watched in awe as her lord was treated like a hero. Meanwhile, Graham commented on how quickly the reconstruction was progressing. He said it was rare to see a village recover this fast. The main reason for this was Aina. She gave clear and efficient instructions to everyone. At first, she worked with the village women to provide food for the workers. However, a disagreement broke out between the villagers and mercenaries over their different working methods. Aina stepped in, and her sudden interference made everyone turn their frustration toward her. However, she stayed calm and suggested a compromise. Seeing how composed she was helped the others calm down and listen. In the end, Aina somehow became their general manager. According to the villagers, Aina's charisma made them want to follow her, or rather they felt a sudden urge to serve her. After all, she was once a princess who knew how to lead, so it all happened naturally. That being said, the fast-paced reconstruction wasn't only thanks to Aina. Kyunai's medical care also played a big role. Her treatments came with words of encouragement and a warm smile, which kept the workers motivated. Her beauty may have helped, but that wasn't all. Her kindness and care gave emotional support to the hardworking villagers and mercenaries. Yukina stopped by to check on her for a while. On the other hand, Mikage knelt and asked Yukina for a job. Yukina told her there were many jobs to choose from. However, Mikage explained that she was being rejected everywhere she went. She told Yukina that the villagers worshipped her, so they refused to let her work. The village also knew about her reputation as the Silver Flash, and her important role in the Goblin Riot incident. Because of this, even if she tried to find a job, no one dared to assign her one. Mikage realized she wasn't suited for regular labor since the only skill she had was sword fighting. Yukina then mentioned that most of the monsters in the area had already been wiped out, but he could use some help patrolling to make sure everyone felt safe while working. Mikage immediately agreed, saying it was the perfect job for her. Without wasting any time, she rushed off to patrol the area. A few days passed, and the workers were amazed at how strong Yukina was when they saw him lift a huge log by himself. He also noticed that everyone was helping each other with smaller tasks. This made him wonder if it was all thanks to Graham. Graham admitted it was true and revealed that he had been secretly increasing his own weight every day. Because of this, Yukina had unknowingly built up his strength. Graham then told Yukina that if he couldn't handle this much, he wouldn't be able to lift his Balmung form. Yukina then remembered the dragon-slaying cursed blade. The shaft of the spear wasn't actually a regular spear's shaft, but was designed to support a massive jet-black blade. Its true form was Balmung, the legendary cursed blade made for slaying dragons. When Balmung appeared, knowledge of how to use it instantly entered Yukina's mind, as if he had known how to wield it all along. At that moment, he no longer felt that sensation. Something inside him told him that even if he tried to use it again, he would be able to control it easily. Graham agreed that using Balmung required more than just arm strength, and admitted that Yukina still had a long way to go. He explained that it was a special power meant for times of crisis, and he knew that Yukina understood this as well. Yukina wondered if Graham was talking about the conditions for using Balmung and confirmed that he knew. His emotions were a mix of strong anger and a deep desire to meet the expectations of those who believed in him. This feeling made his heart soar like never before. Graham then said that the jet-black blade was a reflection of Yukina's heart, or rather his soul. The shaking of his soul was the only way to summon Balmung. For now, Graham was glad that Yukina understood this. Yukina fully realized that he could not activate Balmung unless he was in a life-or-death situation, but he did not want to find himself in another dangerous mess. Graham told him that he would always have a choice. He explained that heroes had a kind of fate that made it impossible for them to avoid trouble. The only difference was whether they walked into it on their own or if trouble found them. Yukina said he could handle it if he was the one choosing to face the danger, but he did not want trouble chasing after him. Graham told him to either accept it or get used to it. Just then, Mikaj came running in with news. She reported that she had found some goblins. Yukina asked how many she had seen. Mikaj confirmed that she had killed 2 or 3 on the way. She did not see a large group or a nest, but she wanted to know Yukina's thoughts. Yukina said he would rather avoid them, and Mikaj agreed. The villagers were already beginning to recover, but some had lost loved ones. The rebuilding of the village was also almost finished, and he did not want to ruin their progress. Yukina asked Graham for his opinion. Graham suggested preparing for the worst-case scenario. He advised Yukina to start by investigating the cave that had once been the goblin's nest. Yukina remembered reports saying that the magic circle inside had already disappeared, but Graham insisted they should make sure. That night, Yukina told the girls not to let the villagers know about their actions. He wanted them to finish investigating the cave before sunrise. Holding a torch, he led the group forward. Aina looked around and said nothing seemed strange. Most of the magic circles were no longer intact. However, Mikaj pointed out that they couldn't rule out the possibility that something was still hiding in the shadows. Aina agreed. Kunai then mentioned that she felt out of place. Mikaj responded that she wouldn't even ask what she meant by that. Kunai was surprised to see how comfortable Aina seemed with exploring. Aina explained that her royal family believed in hands-on experience. She had joined military units on expeditions, learned how to march and set up camps. She even explored caves on her own as part of her training. Kunai had assumed that Aina, being a princess, lived a more elegant and luxurious life. Aina admitted that she experienced those things too, but she also trained hard. Yukina, growing irritated, told them to save their conversation for later and focus on their mission. Graham commented that it was a leader's job to keep his team in line and found it admirable that Yukina didn't let his female teammates just act cute. Yukina quickly reminded him not to call them his harem. Mikaj then sensed that they were approaching a larger space and informed Yukina. He understood and told everyone to be ready for a fight at any moment. Soon, they reached a wide area. Yukina wondered if it had once been a reception hall. Since his torch wasn't bright enough, Aina stepped forward and used her magic to create a glowing light. She explained that it was a spell to brighten the surroundings for a short time. However, the light source couldn't move, but it was enough to help them see. Looking around, Yukina guessed that many goblins had once used the space, but now there was nothing in sight. Aina noticed a magic circle and carefully moved closer to check it. However, it was no longer working. After examining it, Aina confirmed that there were no signs of recent use or repair attempts. Graham agreed with Aina, pointing out that the magic circle had already been completely destroyed. Yukina felt relieved, believing that the worst-case scenario was no longer a concern. He then wondered if the goblins Mikaj had encountered were just wild ones from the area. Mikaj, however, thought they were leftover creatures from the swarm that had been summoned near the village. Yukina decided to gather some mercenaries after rebuilding the village so they could investigate further. Mikaj supported this plan. Meanwhile, Aina seemed troubled. Mikaj noticed and asked if something was wrong. Aina explained that the broken magic circle was the same as those found in the royal capital. She observed that these circles were made with unusual precision. Once activated, they absorbed mana from the surrounding area and could run for a long time without needing much upkeep. Aina also explained that the summoned monsters went through an imprinting process to prevent them from attacking certain targets. Kyunai admitted she wasn't an expert in this field, but she guessed that a lot of effort had gone into making the magic circle. Aina agreed, saying that creating a summoning magic circle required advanced skills, and adding so many functions was not something that could be done overnight. Kyunai then wondered how these circles had been set up in the first place. She pointed out that if a demon had tried setting them up at night, the royal guards would have noticed. Aina finally revealed that they had already discovered how the magic circles had been placed in the royal capital. She admitted that what she was about to say might bring shame to the royal family, but she decided to share it anyway. She revealed that one of the key figures in national politics had secretly worked with the demons. This man was desperate for power and had conflicts with other nobles. To rise above them, he made a deal with the demons, agreeing to become their puppet in exchange for the highest position in the country. Because of him, the demons were able to place the magic circles without attracting the attention of the royal guards. Seeing Yukina's serious expression, Mikaj asked if something was bothering him. Yukina wondered if that man was the only noble citizen working with the demons. When Aina flinched, Yukina realized he was right. Aina didn't like suspecting someone from their inner circle, but she admitted that the chances were high. Graham was amazed at how Yukina could figure out important things so easily. Yukina then remembered a saying, "If there was one cockroach in the kitchen, there were probably 100 more hiding." Graham thought the comparison was harsh, but Yukina decided there was no point in discussing it further. Since the magic circle wasn't working and there were no signs of another goblin invasion, he suggested they return to the village. However, Mikaj stopped them, saying something felt off just as she had suspected. She noticed a slight change in the airflow from the entrance to their current location. She explained that in a closed space with only one exit, there shouldn't be much airflow. Yukina asked what she meant, and Graham told him to imagine the cave as a tube. If one end was blocked, air wouldn't flow through from the other end. Since they could feel the wind moving, it meant both sides were open. This suggested that another tunnel existed besides the entrance they had used. Yukina found it strange because they hadn't seen any other way in or out. It would be troublesome, but he told the others to help search for the hidden tunnel. After looking around for a while, Kyunai got Yukina's attention. Yukina wondered if she had found something. Kyunai pointed at the wall in front of her, saying it looked strange because it was in a different condition than the others. Yukina examined it and agreed. Graham confirmed that the wall was thicker compared to the rest. Then, Aina explained that it was cleverly made using earth magic and even a skilled mage would have trouble noticing it. Since two people confirmed it, Yukina told the others to step back. He made his spear heavier, so heavy that it could smash the ground beneath him. Then he told Graham to break the wall apart and threw him forward like a professional javelin thrower. As the wall crumbled, Yukina was shocked to see a secret passage behind it. Feeling a strong breeze, Mikaj guessed that the passage led outside. Aina also confirmed that it wasn't a naturally formed tunnel. Suddenly, Graham spoke up with bad news. Monsters were approaching. Strange lizard-like creatures appeared, and Mikaj recognized them as wreck lizards. Seeing these monsters, Graham was sure that someone was still working behind the scenes. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 22. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.